Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm and Iowa, the voice of college football, and we hope you recognize us. It's been a while since we've been able to jump on and talk Iowa football. I'm joined by Coach Don Patterson. And Don, it has been a few weeks since our last live show. First of all, how are you doing, and how's the prep for Kentucky going?
Well, I think the prep for Kentucky is going okay. I can only speak for myself. I feel like there's not much more that I can investigate other than read the papers, for any daily updates here and there. But I think it's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be, I think, a close, hard-fought game, and that's typically what you get in a bowl game, of course. If you played in a lot of bowl games, your record's probably somewhere around 500, unless you happen to be Alabama, maybe. They seem to have a habit of winning more often than not. But the rest of us typically win about half the bowl games and lose about half, and that's the way it should go.
A couple things I want to hit, and we can open this up. I'm going to open up the caller line. So if you want to give us a call, we're on the Voice of College Football line. So that number, if you see at the bottom of the screen, is 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332. But Don, before we get to Iowa and the Citrus Bowl and Kentucky and everything that's next week lies in store for us, I want to address the hottest topic right now in college football, and that is the cancellations, unfortunately, of several bowl games. We've had the Hawaii Bowl canceled. We've got the Military Bowl now gone. And then the third one, I can't even think of who. It was Boston College, East Carolina was Military Bowl. Virginia and SMU, and I'm trying to think of what that one was even called. But the bottom line is games are getting canceled now. I don't want to get into a debate about, should the NCAA step in and change COVID protocol. I know that other organizations and leagues have done that, including the NFL, or at least updated certain asset or facets to their plan. But specifically, these games that are getting canceled, my biggest complaint, and I tweeted out about this earlier today, Don, is the fact that you have teams canceling the day before a game is to be played. And that is so bothersome to me. Again, you look at a team like Memphis, they go out to Hawaii, they're ready to play, and you have a home team in Hawaii that obviously has been having issues. Don't tell me that the COVID issues came up the day they canceled. That's just baloney. I think we all know that. Same today with the Eastern Carolina situation. I know it wasn't East Carolina. It was whoever their opponent was at Boston College. There are issues, but why is it that I understand you're out for your own team, but if these teams had canceled earlier, wouldn't you have time to be able to get a replacement like Illinois to be able to come in and play?
I would think so, yes. And the only question I had about the whole thing is these positive tests that the players are causing right now. Is it because of the Delta variant, or is it because of the new variant, which is not nearly as dangerous as the old one? So my question, if it is the Omicron variant, as I understand it, the players may not even realize they have it, of course, and yet they do. They're positive on the test, and as I understand it, it's not likely to do any serious harm to anyone that's involved directly with the game, the players. And as I know it, if you have a positive test come back, the one thing for sure you should do is stay away from your parents and your grandparents. Be sure you avoid older people that are more at risk than you are. So I don't know beyond that. It seems I know that one thing that comes to mind for me, these so many of these locations, they really rely on bowl revenue. And we're talking about our economy already being damaged to some extent, and of course canceling our bowl games at the last minute simply makes that problem even worse than it already is.
Well, like I said, Memphis is, they're in a situation where the day before, they went out to Hawaii. Now you can say, well, they got a free trip out to Hawaii. That's true, I guess. I'm sure the players, they didn't head right home after that announcement, but that's got to be devastating to these players and even the coaches. And we know Brett Bielema has been very adamant on Twitter about how he's ready to go. They're ready to go play somebody. And I commend Brett for being, being ready and having at least having that mentality. Rutgers was able to sub in for Texas A&M, so they'll of course play Wake Forest. I have no problem with that, Don. The more football, the better, in my opinion. People who complain about 5 and 7 teams playing in bowl games, to me, don't have a passion for college football. At least that I do. I enjoy watching a lot of these games, Don. I know you enjoy watching at least some of them.
I'm sorry, Corey, I lost your signal there just for a second. If you could repeat that last sentence.
I think those that are complaining about 7 and 5 teams making bowl games don't have the same passion for college football, at least that I do. I know you enjoy watching a number of these games. You and I both watched Army and Missouri the other day, but I enjoy watching these early games, and I think it's great that Rutgers can go play. It's just frustrating to me that, again, teams like, and I'm not blaming the players, but Hawaii and now BC are canceling so late in the process that they're not giving teams an opportunity to play. And here's the other thing, Don. Why are we canceling bowl games? Like, why does the military bowl get canceled? Is it not? Are they not capable of pushing the bowl game back a week and just getting another team in there? Why are we just canceling games?
I don't know, Corey. It's really hard to understand exactly why it's necessary.
And the Fenway Bowl, let me just say this, the Fenway Bowl was scheduled for Wednesday. So you already have SMU and East Carolina, who, by the way, are both in the AAC, but have not played each other this year. How hard would it be? Those are two healthy teams, we assume, to schedule those teams to play each other. And if Wednesday's too soon in the Fenway Bowl, then again, just push it back a couple of days. It's just frustrating to me, and I'm disappointed for those players. I did see that a number of East Carolina players entered the portal this afternoon, which would indicate that they're not planning on rescheduling any games, which is just frustrating and disappointing. But that kind of leads me to my concern about this game, Don. You and I were talking before we jumped live with our listeners here. You are planning on going to Orlando for the game. I had considered it, not shutting down that prospect yet. I'm kind of a spur of the moment type guy with that kind of thing, and it's possible we could still go. But what I'm concerned about right now is this game. For some reason, I have no reason to think that there's COVID issues going on, but that's got to be a concern right now for the average fan and for fans who are traveling down to Florida, Don.
I suppose, but I've seen a lot of football games in recent days, both NFL and college, where no one in the crowd appears to be concerned at all about the whole virus thing. You've got a lot of people that are supporting their favorite team, regardless of what the Omicron variant might be doing. So it's just awkward for me to understand why games need to be canceled.
Yeah, I do think there are, and I'm not trying to downplay the virus. I think I've made that clear that you got to take it seriously, but I do think that there probably should be a look at protocol. There should probably, I just don't understand the cancellations, but I digress. Let's move on to more positive things to talk about. Specifically, we do, assuming that there are no issues COVID related, and again, I have no reason to think there are with Iowa or Kentucky. We have a game this coming Saturday, Don, between two teams who have, just 3 losses apiece. Iowa, of course, a 10-win season. Kentucky with 9 wins. What have been your initial takeaways when you've looked at Kentucky on tape? You've studied the analytics. How has this team gotten to 9-3?
Well, I think Mark Stoops deserves a lot of credit. He would say that the players and the assistant coaches deserve all the credit, but Mark deserves some as well. He's a lot like Bobby, in that he's a lot like Kirk, frankly. He's going to react in all situations, but he's not going to overreact. So what you end up with, as a result of that, you end up with a lot of good, steady leadership, a lot of sound decision-making, whether it be about when spring ball should be or exactly what the workout routine should be from one week to the next. And Mark's been rewarded with a contract extension now up through the 2028 season. As you know, the SEC is a tough league, and over the last 6 years, he's exactly at 500 in conference play, and that sounds mediocre maybe to a lot of people, but you got to realize these are some of the best teams year in and year out in all of college football that are within that league. They were second in the SEC East behind Georgia. Georgia, of course, was unbeaten at 8-0, but Kentucky was at 5-3 in their conference schedule, and obviously they won their 4 non-conference games too, so that puts them at 9-3. They don't beat themselves too much of the time. What's amazing about Kentucky, Corey, as you already know, if you want to talk about a big difference between the two teams, the best place to start and end would be with turnover margin. It's really pretty hard to imagine. We're plus 13 in turnover margin. And I just checked the NCAA stats today to be sure I knew where we stood. Plus 13 puts us at a tie for third, as I recall. But we're in third place on turnover margin at plus 13. Meanwhile, Kentucky's at 128 out of 130, I might add, at minus 13. So if it's just a normal game involving our entire season and their entire season, you would expect that we would be plus 2 versus Kentucky. Here's the bad news to our fans. Plus 2 might not be good enough. The reason I say that, Corey, is because there were a couple of games in the early season where teams were plus 3, believe it or not, in turnover margin, and yet they still lost to Kentucky. And you might assume that those are a couple of mediocre teams, but that's not true either. Louisiana Monroe is a pretty darn good football team year in and year out. They were plus 3 and lost, as did South Carolina. Again, 3 and lost. So my recommendation to the football program was you better win big on turnover margin. How big? As big as you can. Plus 3 is normally a really safe number to have on your side. Just for the record, Mississippi State was the only opponent that was plus 4. Of course, they won comfortably, as most of the fans know. But plus 3 may or may not get it done. So win as big as you can on turnovers and then still win at least half of the other top parameters. And I say that because South Carolina is an example of a team that won on turnovers to the tune of plus 3 and still lost the game. How did they lose the game? I think, as I recall, they won maybe 4 out of the top 15 parameters. Obviously, they won the biggest of all in turnover margin, but they didn't win many others. The vast majority of the other top parameters went to Kentucky. And, of course, that's why I recommended the coaching staff, find a way to win half of them. You don't have to win them all, but if you win half of them, plus one of them being turnover margin, if you can be plus 2 or better on turnovers, I'd be very surprised if you don't win the game. I'll say it that way.
And you're right, 0.8 turnovers forced per game for Kentucky, which is worst in the SEC, which is astonishing given the 9-3 record. Kentucky is 4th in defensive points per game, so it's a solid unit. They just don't force a lot of turnovers. It's interesting, 6 defensive INTs, and maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, Don, but 6 defensive INTs, half of those have been returned for touchdowns by Kentucky. So they are opportunistic when they get the ball defensively to return these touchdowns. And I don't know where those touchdowns occurred, so perhaps they have been opportunistic as far as field position as well in forcing turnovers. 3 fumbles forced, but again, last in the SEC in forced turnovers. As far as offense is concerned, they are 5th in offensive points per game. They scored 52 against a pretty good Louisville defense. I mean, middle of the pack ACC Louisville defense, Don. In fact, those were the most points Louisville had given up all year. And boy, Will Levis, we can talk about him, but Will Levis was just spectacular in that game. I believe 4, if I'm not mistaken, 4 rushing touchdowns for Will. And he had at least one absolutely jaw-dropping run in that game where he juked a defender out of his shoes and then he hurdled a defender in about 2 seconds time. So obviously Will is a kid Iowa was familiar with. He played at Penn State, transferred to Kentucky, and of course Iowa was in on him hard in the recruiting process. Thought we had him, and Don, that's another one that slipped through our grasp. But how hard is it going to be for Iowa to defend him?
It's going to be a challenge, and just for the record, we were the very first school to offer him a scholarship, which I think our listeners might find interesting. I went back and checked because I was curious. I did recall that Will started the game against Iowa a year ago in representing Penn State. He did start that game. I went back and actually looked at the play-by-play. He was replaced in the third quarter after fumbling for the 3rd time. They lost the first 2 fumbles. I believe they were both sack situations where the ball came out. And the third one, I believe, as I recall, was a run play. They did recover that one, but at that point, the coaches had seen enough. He was replaced in the third quarter. The score at the time was 31-7. So Will Levis certainly doesn't have any comfortable thought process as it relates to playing against Iowa's defense, because last year was a long day for him. Certainly, this is a change of scenery, of course, in different uniforms. So I'm sure he wants to put that game behind him, but there's no way he's going to forget entirely as to what happened that day. One obvious question I have going forward, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but I am curious how many of those turnovers. They've lost 22 turnovers for the season. That puts them at 108th, just to give you an idea. That's total turnovers, either interceptions or fumbles lost. And I'm curious how many of those are directly attributable to him, because last year he was involved with 2 lost fumbles against us and a third fumble that they did recover. So I'm curious if he has some of the same ball security issues maybe that Martinez has from Nebraska. You might recall he's been known to cough the ball from time to time. We need to find a way to generate turnovers, and obviously Levis the ball's in his hands so much of the time. It's logical that you need to try to get the ball out as often as you possibly can, whether it's a run or a pass.
Iowa is also familiar with Wan'Dale Robinson. He's another kid on that Kentucky offense who is dynamic, was obviously spectacular at Nebraska. Kentucky tends to, I've noticed Mark Stoops seems to like big physical receivers. And so they're going to have Iowa cornerbacks specifically. We hope Terry Roberts can get back. He was not on the most recent depth chart that was released, but we assume that will be Jamari Harris and Riley Moss. Will Levis can throw the football as well. I mean, he is a complete player. How does Iowa defend those talented wideouts?
Well, one thing for sure, we have to ID Wan'Dale Robinson all day long. This year, a school record 94 catches for 1,164 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's also run the ball 7 times. He's averaged almost 16 yards on each of those 7 carries. I did check to see what he did against us a year ago. I was hoping he had a long day at the office, just like Levis did against Iowa. But Robinson had a solid game against us last year. He had 9 catches for 75 yards. And he ran the ball 2 or 3 times, as I recall, for another 12 or 15 yards. So had a solid game in representing Nebraska. And regardless of what happened a year ago against us, we better identify him every snap. They move him around. Sometimes he's an outside receiver. I would hope that we would double him as often as possible when he's lined up on the perimeter of the formation as an outside receiver. They're not crazy enough to always have him lined up out there. Oftentimes they'll put him in a slot also. And now it's a trickier proposition to double him, although there are ways you can do it, what we refer to as combo coverages. It's possible that you could assign 2 defenders to defend against an inside receiver. One would play with outside leverage, one with inside leverage. And now you effectively have him sandwiched in between 2 defenders. And that, of course, when you do that, you're compromising yourself somewhere else. And it's okay to do it as long as the other team doesn't pick up on it and decide to work another direction where you're more vulnerable.
Well, Don, when you don't have a call-in show for a few weeks, and I haven't done a whole lot as far as call-in shows with Gary Close because we've had so few Iowa basketball games, you get off your game. So I had the wrong phone number up on the screen. So I appreciate Darrell MVP bringing this to my attention. He said, why is the number offline? Well, I put the wrong number up there. So we're not on the main line, folks. So the number to call in is our new number for the Iowa channel. It's at the bottom of the screen, 515-635. And you know what? That's the wrong number as well. I'll figure this out eventually, Don. Let me grab the correct number. Oh my goodness. This is
Let's call another audible then.
I'm glad you're here, Don, because so far this has been rough. All right. We'll throw the number up. There it is. I can tell you with confidence that is the correct number. 515-758-7773. So it's not Mark Rogers' number. It's not the From the Hawkeye of the Storm basketball number. It is 515-758-7773. And if that doesn't work, I don't know what to tell you. All right. Darrell MVP says, Will Levis throws bullets. The wide receivers can't catch it, and they pop up for INTs. Have you seen some of that as well, Don? I know Darrell MVP is a Kentucky fan.
I haven't seen enough video to comment on it. It sounds like Darrell's much more the expert than I am, but he brings up a good point. You've heard me say before, it's never about velocity. It's more about ball placement, making the ball as easy to catch as is logical based on the location of all the defenders. And then furthermore, work to keep the ball under the receiver's chin. That's especially true if he's squared up to the ball, such as a curl route or an in route or a stop route. It's critical that you keep the ball down, because now if it is muffed, it's more likely to go to the ground versus a ball that's thrown somewhere over his head.
All right. We do have a caller here. Thank you for calling Iowa at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. Hey, Don. How you doing? It's Darrell MVP. How you doing?
Good
Doing
to talk
well.
to you, sir.
Yeah, I'm one of the only Kentucky fans, so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to give you the other team's perspective on the
Sure.
Citrus Bowl.
Absolutely.
I heard Don mention about the interceptions. Will Levis has a tendency to throw every ball like at 200 miles an hour, and it'll hit the wide receiver so hard it'll pop about 5 feet up in the air. They'll the defense will tackle the wide receiver and they'll pick it off. That's happened at least 5 times this year.
Well, you've certainly watched a lot more Kentucky. I was going to say that you've watched a lot more Kentucky football than I have. I know the little glimpse I got of him. Again, I watched the Louisville game back this evening, and that game, Will Levis looked like Superman on the ground. So that had to tell me something, that there's no way that they were that bad in turnover margin unless he was making mistakes through the air. So that doesn't surprise me.
Right. And our running back, Chris Rodriguez, who's had 1,000 yards rushing, he has this tendency to be a bulldog, work hard on the interior, go between the tackles, but sometimes he likes to get just that little extra yardage. Especially it's problematic on the goal line because he'll reach out, and when he's right about to cross the line, he'll get hit in the arm and the ball will come loose. That happened twice against Missouri and once against South Carolina when going for a first down. So we've had some issues with.
If there's any consolation to you as a Kentucky fan, Don and I have talked about this. Iowa's not very good forcing fumbles. Don, do you want to talk about that for a moment? That's kind of an odd stat, but Iowa have a bunch of ball hawks, but they don't force a lot of fumbles, it seems.
Yeah, you've heard me talk about it. It's pretty unusual. I think we got 24 interceptions and only 5 recovered fumbles, which is 24 is obviously a very high number. 5 is actually below average when you look at all of college football. So it is odd that we haven't been able to force more fumbles over the entire course of the season. And you've heard me say before, Corey, you don't want to compromise your ability to tackle someone. The first guy to the ball has got to focus on just good tackling fundamentals. And it's the second and third guy getting there that has the better chance to get the ball out. That's typically how most people coach it. And obviously you got to rally to the ball to be able to have a second and third player there. And we're good at that. And maybe the fundamentals, of course, have a chance to be emphasized in preparation for the bowl game, unlike in the regular season when you've only got a week of practice time to be ready for the next game. So with a little bit of luck, we'll see a greater effort to get the ball out on those situations in which the running back or the quarterback is in a confined area and we've got a lot of tacklers around the ball.
Would you agree with that, Darrell MVP?
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Anything else for us?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You were talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. How are you guys at covering like go routes and jet sweeps and those types of things?
That's a good question. I think that's there for the taking, Don, because I think maybe our 2 most disciplined cornerbacks, and I know there are going to be people out there that disagree with me, and Riley Moss is defensive back of the year in the Big Ten. Our 2 most disciplined cornerbacks could be out in this game. One of them is Matt Hankins is out. Terry Roberts could be out. And I think they've got an opportunity to beat a guy like Moss and a guy like Terry Roberts on go routes, Don.
Yeah, I think they'd be foolish not to give it a try, and I suspect they will. We better be prepared for that possibility. And let's just go back to the Big Ten championship game to realize Michigan got off to a great start. And a simple explanation of why they got off to a great start with aggressive play calling. And oftentimes in a bowl game, you'll see someone with that mindset. It's not a conference game. It's supposed to be a reward for the players anyway. The fans have gone to the trouble of being there, so why not reward them with a lot of good aggressive play calling? Everybody enjoys an exciting, wide open game. And oftentimes you get that in a bowl scenario. Maybe it also helps from a scoring standpoint. It helps that maybe the opposing defense hadn't really had a chance to tackle live in some time. Maybe the last regular season game was played a month ago. So it does give the offense a chance to maybe bust some big plays that they typically wouldn't make. I do think we need to be prepared for them to test us deep early in the game. It certainly worked out all right for Michigan to be able to challenge us with trick plays and plays that are designed to be big gainers, whether you call them a trick play or not. And I think we need to be prepared for that again from Kentucky, because that was the formula for success for Michigan. And I'm sure Kentucky's looked long and hard at that game in preparation for the bowl.
When every game we've played, I've noticed two things out of Kentucky. We will always throw a go route, regardless. Every game I've seen this year, we will throw at least one go route to Wan'Dale Robinson, and it's usually a 60 or 70 or 50-yard ball. And most of the time it doesn't work, but at least it keeps the defense honest. And then sometimes we run a jet sweep from the left to the right with Wan'Dale Robinson. It kind of reminds me of Tyreek Hill with the Kansas City Chiefs, how they use him as a multi-purpose wide receiver.
Yeah.
So.
Well, why wouldn't you use? I think you that's just smart coaching if you're Mark Stoops and that offensive coaching staff, right, Don? I mean, he's their best. I mean, my guess would be he and Will Levis are their two best players offensively. And
sometimes it's hard to get the ball to someone from a passing standpoint, so that's where the jet sweep is so effective. If we can't throw it to him, let's hand it to him. And some people kind of cheat a little bit, and you'll see on jet sweeps they'll actually pitch the ball forward to be able to count that as a forward pass. And of course, the advantage, even if he muffs it, it's just an incomplete pass. Yeah. So some people hand them off. Some people, it's a soft toss. They basically just pitch the ball directly in front of their location. And of course, it's just floating up there in front of the jet sweep receiver. And that gives him a chance to catch it and do so in full stride. But I'm sure they're going to work hard to get in the ball early on. That just makes sense. If he doesn't get a dozen touches per game, then I wonder why not, because he's clearly one of the best game breakers they have on their entire team.
Yeah, Robinson's got a 1,000 yards wide receiver for this season. He's got the most catches for Kentucky history. So he's definitely he's been the best player. And I mean, every game I've watched him, he's just got a different level of speed compared to most people.
Did you say
the only game I've watched where I was like,
for the season, he's got the most catches in Kentucky history? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
94 catches.
Yeah, and he's had multiple games of like 7, 8, 9 catches. He's really good. I mean,
he might be one
probably
of the most
been the best player.
He might be one of the most underrated receivers nationally then, because he was no slouch at Nebraska. I mean, it's incredible that he's been that successful. Most transfers, Don, I think we can agree, most transfers aren't.
Yeah, you're right. And to the credit of the coaches, they've really done a good job of getting him his touches. 94 catches, and in addition to that, 7 run plays, totaling 111 yards. And I did go to the trouble of checking. He's also fielded a few punts this year. He may be their number 1 punt returner for the game. I don't know, but that receiver that is out, another top receiver for him, I can't recall his name because he's out with, I believe it was a car accident. What's his name?
Josh Ollie.
Yes, Ollie. I believe he must have been the number 1 punt returner, but I couldn't help but notice that Robinson, I think, had maybe 5 return punts. versus Ollie's 9, I believe, for the year. So it wouldn't shock me if he was back there in punts also.
Yeah, Ollie was the number 1 punt returner all year for Kentucky. Probably to give Robinson some rest, honestly, because every play he's either in motion, he's the main target. He's always doing something. He reminds me a lot of Randall Cobb back in the day, when I doubt many people were watching Kentucky when we were going 2-10 and 3-9, but Wan'Dale Robinson, who's the guy who plays for the Packers now, as everybody knows, he used to do literally everything for Kentucky: running, quarterback, field goal kicker, actual kicker.
You're not going to believe this, but years ago I actually saw a game in Lexington. I've only seen one Kentucky game in my lifetime, but it happened to be when Randall Cobb was playing. And I forget who they played even, but it was an inspired effort on his part. And as I recall, they did win the game. It was a tight game. It was an SEC game. And I was very impressed with Randall Cobb, and I'm not surprised that he's had such an outstanding pro career.
Yeah, so that's all I got for you, Corey and Don. I hope this is a great game, and good luck to you guys.
Absolutely. Appreciate the call to Real MVP, and certainly it's nice to have some gracious opposing fans to deal with. And he has been, I know he has been a very active listener on Mark's main channel, and so we appreciate him calling in this evening. We do have another call here to take. We'll see if it's a Kentucky fan or an Iowa fan. Thank you for calling Iowa at the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, guys. This is actually Yakov22.
Yakov22, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, thank God, and I appreciate you guys taking my call. Hope you had a great holiday yesterday. Actually, I wanted to ask Coach Don a question or two here.
Sure.
It's not exactly about Iowa football, but I'm someone who really loves the history of football, both college and the NFL. And I was just looking at, I know obviously Coach played at Army in the early 70s, and I was just looking, Coach, at your schedule, and particularly in 71 and 72, your junior and senior year, I believe. And I saw that you guys played in 71, you played Penn State. At the time they had Franco Harris. And I saw in 72, you played both, you played Nebraska, who had Johnny Rogers, and you played Penn State, who was a 72 Heisman Trophy winner. And you also played Penn State, who had John Cappelletti, who would go on to win the Heisman the following year in 1973. I was just wondering, Coach, if those are three of the greatest high school college running backs of all time. And the NFL, really only Franco Harris was great. The other two, Cappelletti played several years. I think Rogers had some injuries that kept him from excelling in the NFL. But I'm just wondering if you might want to. My first question is if you maybe could tell me a little about them and maybe rank them, how good of players you thought they were in those games.
Well, that's a tough one. I don't have any fond memories of any of those three games, actually, because as I recall, they won all three of them. I do recall our senior year, we did go to Texas A&M and upset the Aggies. And that was a big win for us because it meant a lot to me because I was born and raised in Texas. And, of course, it's never easy to beat A&M. They have the 12th man, as you know, and the tradition of the 12th man has been in place for a long, long time. So, gosh, I don't know. I guess the longest day I remember in the fall of 72, we opened that season, as I recall, at home against Nebraska. And they had a great football team. And I won't tell you the score. I'm kind of embarrassed about the score. But let's just say it was very one-sided. And it was a long day for us. And it was the 100th year of college football. And wouldn't you know it, that game, I believe, was on national TV, I think. And it was a long, long day. And yet the beauty of college football, we get smoked one week by Nebraska. I don't recall for sure that A&M was the very next game, but it was the same season. So how do you lose in a big way to Nebraska and go to A&M and beat them? It just demonstrates again that young people are pretty resilient and they recognize, okay, we played poorly today, but it doesn't mean we can't play a great game 7 days later. It happens that way all the time in college football and college sports in general. You see the same thing in other sports. So Franco Harris was a beast, I guess, is about the best word to think of. He was difficult to play against, and gosh, those guys are all such great players. You know, it was just an honor to be be on the schedule and play against them.
Coach, I might put you on the spot for a second. Ask, did any of them ever break into the backfield? I know you played defensive back. Did any of them ever break in the backfield and they were called upon you to tackle them and make an open field tackle?
I don't recall ever tackling any of those guys one-on-one. Might have been in on a tackle, but not a solo, that's for sure.
Hopefully your linebackers took care of it for you.
Right.
Well, anyway, Coach, I appreciate that going down a little memory lane. I know I was trying. I know that you guys didn't win those games. I wasn't really trying to speak about that. I was just more curious about those three guys and your thoughts on them and if you had to ever make a play on any of those guys. And I appreciate you sharing your memories of that. And I look forward to hearing the rest of the show.
Appreciate it, Yakov22. Have a great night.
Sure.
Always enjoy the calls there. And I didn't want to skip this question. The man here asks, Coach Patterson, any thoughts on the Army-Navy game? I didn't know it didn't go your way because, of course, you were rooting for Army there, Don, but sure was an exciting game. I watched that game from start to finish. And, Don, I'll be completely honest with you. I have never been a big Army-Navy guy as far as the Army-Navy football game. But, man, that was a good physical football game. And, yeah, I know Navy won. But that was just a hard-fought game, and I can't remember the kid from Navy, the linebacker. But, man, that kid looked like he could play on Sundays. Maybe I'm overestimating his abilities, but, man, that was a good football game.
It was Navy's day. You probably heard the fake punt. He didn't even realize it was a fake punt. They made their call, and the center somehow misunderstood and understood he was supposed to snap the ball to the linebacker who broke a tackle and made a first down, of course. It was a bold event for them, and at the time, I remember thinking, why did he call a fake punt? Well, it turns out he didn't. It was simply a mistake. But as I've always said, some days it seems like you're meant to win, and other days it seems as if you're destined to lose regardless of what you do. I kind of felt that way.
Let me interject here, though, Don, on that, because I don't know how you could – if anybody saw that play, the ball came straight to him as a linebacker, and that ball's coming fast. I mean, I don't know how he accidentally caught it or caught it on the fly. That was an impressive play if that's the truth.
Yeah, it hit him right in the face. The ball, I think, probably physically ran into his face mask. He controlled it enough where it didn't bounce off his face mask. But to catch it, and of course, that meant that nobody up front even knew they were blocking for a fake. So he kind of got the first down on his own, and it was a key play in the game. I couldn't help but feel this way, Corey. Let me back up. I'll say this for Navy. Navy played a very difficult schedule over the season, more difficult than I realized. And as the game was being introduced, I realized, oh my gosh, they played all these really good opponents, one of which was Cincinnati, as I recall. They played all these teams really well. A lot of them were one-score games, whether it was SMU or Cincinnati or a couple of other good teams too. I can't recall who they were now. But here's Navy 3-8 with a schedule, I think, that was ranked third maybe overall. And here's Army 8-3, but a schedule in the 100s somewhere. It just gives you an idea that scheduling does make a difference. And I couldn't help but feel that Navy outplayed us, and Navy also outcoached us. I felt how else could you explain, how could Navy outrush Army to that extent? Because Army, both schools pride themselves in running the football, of course, but they probably outrushed Army by 100 yards or more, I think. It was at least enough to make a difference in the game.
Yeah, and again, just a really solid football game. And Don, I've enjoyed the beginning of bowl season with some of these games. I mean, the Army-Missouri game was terrific. I texted you at the end of that game because I thought it was a bad coaching move by Army to run the ball on, was it first down and 10 and let like 15, 20 seconds run off when you had time to run another play or two and you had a timeout so you could run a pass play or whatever. But, boy, they put it on the leg of a kicker who hadn't had much success from over 40 yards, and I believe
the game winner was 41, as I recall. You're right. I thought at the very least, I understand centering the ball, but don't just if you strictly call for centering the ball, that means you're not worried about even losing a yard or two. You're just trying to get the ball in the middle of the field. The truth of it is they ran it more over toward the left hash. The ball was on the right hash, as I recall. They actually more than centered it. Now, for all we know, the Army kicker wanted the ball on the left hash. The one thing I'm sure of is he wouldn't want to kick it from the right hash because he's a right-footed kicker. And as you know, Corey, kicks usually They usually draw, you know what I mean by draw. Right-footed kicker, the ball usually moves a little bit right to left, assuming no wind. So I would have fully expected them, realizing they still had that timeout, and there was enough time they could run any kind of running play to the left and maybe gain 4 or 5, 6 yards,
Right.
and then effectively center the ball and gain some yards and still be able to burn the timeout. And now you're kicking, and it wasn't a question of whether he could get it there. You know, I had no doubt he was going to get it there from 41 yards, but those of us that might remember a little bit about geometry, just try a 35-yard kick from the middle of the field versus a 41-yard kick, even ideally from the middle of the field too. The angles are different. You know, there's more margin for error from the 35-yard field goal than from the 41. And that simple angle that's different than it would be from further out might be the difference in making or missing a kick.
Yeah, anybody who doesn't understand the importance of angles and place kicking, 2 of Caleb Shudak's misses this year have been from very short distance.
True.
So, and we see that. Mark, voice of college football himself, is here. He reminds us Navy also played Notre Dame, Central Florida, and Houston. It is a tough schedule, and but what a great way to end their season. And that is sort of like, I don't want to say it's their Super Bowl, but it is their bowl game, right? Especially when you're not at 500 or better.
Yeah, very true. You know, it's the game means the world to both sides. It's kind of a neat tradition, as you notice. The goal is to sing last, right? Because the winners sing their alma mater last. Army's always more than happy to let Navy sing first. And in recent years, Army has won more often than not. The trend here, the recent trend has been going Army's way, and yet now Navy's turned it back around again. And I think in the entire history, it's pretty even, but I believe Navy's up by a few games. Maybe it's 55 games to 61, 55 wins to 61, something like that. A lot of games played, more than 100 games played, of course.
I didn't want to skip over this question. I know we talked about the defense for Kentucky. They don't force many turnovers, but they do rank. They are, again, kind of like Iowa's defense in a way. They don't allow a lot of points. But how would you describe the Kentucky defense? Are they going to sell out to stop the Iowa run? How are they going to play the Hawks?
Well, I'm glad you said that, Corey, because I did go to the trouble of looking through all the NCAA stats. These are as current as they can be. They did not include the bowl game from the 25th. We had a bowl game that day. That bowl game is not included, but all the other previous bowl games have been included. So these are the up-to-date stats as current as they can be. I actually looked at 26 different statistical categories, and I made a note, of course, of not just the numbers that related to that particular team, but also the rank. And again, 130 teams ranked. And the bottom line, if you just want to talk in general terms, you're talking about Iowa with a less than average offense, I'll say it that way, with an offense that routinely is ranked somewhere 100th or lower in a lot of different categories, going up against a Kentucky defense that in general ranks somewhere between 30, 40, 50 in that range among 130 teams again. So advantage. If you look at that matchup, you'd have to say advantage to Kentucky's defense. And then the other matchup, of course, their offense versus our defense. Our defense has better numbers in general than Kentucky's defense. The bad news is Kentucky's offense has significantly better numbers than our offense. And then to be more specific, I looked through all 26 of these, and I'm not even going to talk about them if it's pretty even. No reason to discuss as if they're pretty even, but what if they're not so even? Good reason to bring it up. We've already talked about turnovers. We know that's a huge advantage for Iowa. Turnovers gained. There's a couple of different ways, of course, to have an edge in turnover margin. Our route to that success is in gaining turnovers, 29 over our 13 games, so more than 2 per game, versus Kentucky's 9. 29 versus 9. That's third in the country versus 123rd in the country. Big advantage for Iowa. We also do have an advantage in terms of turnovers lost. We've lost 16. They've lost 22. But again, that's not quite as significant. That's 57th versus 108th. So let me just focus on, so obviously turnover margin and turnover gain, those are 2 big ones. all I did is when I was done, out of these 26 statistical categories, 7 of them left one team with a considerably higher ranking than the other. And all I did, I said, to be fair, I said, if there's more than 80 places in difference, in other words, 20 versus 100 or 30 versus 110, I'm going to make a note of it because that team clearly has an edge in that category. And I've already talked about 2 that are in Iowa's favor: turnover margin, turnovers gained. That's 2 for Iowa. But here's some for Kentucky that are worth mentioning. Total offense. Kentucky's offense is 40th. Ours finished 123rd. So you're talking about 431 yards plus versus 297 plus. So on average, they're going to outgain us by 136 yards a game. 134 yards a game, but we're splitting hairs. So that's a significant difference in total offense, 134 yards a game. What about rush offense? Again, they significantly outgain us. They're ranked 23rd. We're ranked 111th. They've rushed for 206 a game. We've rushed for just short of 120 a game. So they've outrushed us a little over 86 yards per game. And again, you're comparing to some degree, you're comparing apples and oranges, of course. But let's face it, they have a lot of tough games on their schedule. We have a lot of tough games on our schedule. So the schedules are not that different. If you looked at strength of schedule, I'm pretty sure they'd be very similar. So they've got a decided edge on total offense and rush offense. They've also got a decided edge on pass efficiency for offense. They're 37th in the country. We're 117th. And again, that's a differential of 80. So their efficiency formula puts them at 149 and change. Ours is at 111 and change. So again, that's a big difference in efficiency of pass offense. Theirs has been much more effective. And part of it deals with throwing the ball to Robinson. Maybe it's a short throw that turns into a long gainer. It still counts as some really positive yardage for Kentucky. Here's the good news in terms of pass offense. We're not very good with our pass offense in terms of ranking. We are outstanding with our pass defense. No surprise to you, Corey. We're 4th in the nation in pass efficiency for defense. That's just a little less than 109 points in their formula versus Kentucky's 86th. And they're at 139.6. So significant difference in pass efficiency defense. But I would caution our fans to understand this. A big part of that differential ties into interceptions again. So if we're not getting picks, then there's not going to be that kind of disparity in terms of pass efficiency defense. That's why we're ranked so high, is because we've intercepted so many passes. It's not that we've done a great job of preventing the other team from moving the ball through the air. We have done a great job in terms of taking the ball away from them, but otherwise not so much in terms of just limiting their yardage. Moving on down, there's only one left. The other big disparity, and this is a real concern because this is an important stat. How about this? Third down conversion percentage for offense. Third down offense, Kentucky is 5th in the country, and they've converted a little over 51% of all third downs compared to our 30, a little less than 4%. So again, that's a big difference. That's 5th in the country versus 109th in the country. That's a concern because let's face it, it's hard to make first downs on first and second down, and it's critical that you be able to convert on third down, and they've done a better job than we have, in part because they've had less third and long. That's the key, is being third and short, third and medium. As you know, they've got a good rush offense. They don't have to throw the ball for a first down, especially if they need 1, 2, or 3. I'm sure the heavy preponderance of those plays would be running plays if it's third and short. So those are the primary areas where it's a big difference. You can ask about any and all. I can touch on others that are significantly different. You'll find this interesting, Corey. Of those 26 categories, I simply ask, who's got an edge over the other? We have an edge on 13. They have an edge on 13 also.
Don, what about it? Maybe I missed this. What about explosive plays?
Explosive plays, this kind of frustrates me. Explosive plays are not kept as part of NCAA stats. As you know, on a routine basis, I can tell you the effective explosive plays on Big Ten games. And for that matter, as you probably know, if I run that same kind of bowl evaluation on Kentucky that I have on a Big Ten opponent, then you know I have an answer to that too. It's an answer I'm not prepared to divulge at this point because I do think that it's some information that I don't want to share with another team.
I will just say what Darrell MVP has to say. He sums it up. He says, Kentucky gives up a lot of big plays, but Iowa can't make a big play. And that's a valid statement to make. That is a valid statement to make, Darrell MVP. I don't know that he's watched a lot of Iowa games, but if you haven't watched a lot of, maybe you watched a lot of this show, because how do you know Iowa can't make big plays? It's sort of ironic because early on in the season, Don, Iowa was making some big plays, especially with the ground game. You think of that first game, Tyler Goodson with the season-breaking run against Indiana. They had a big run, I believe, against Kent State, or two actually in that game, I think. Colorado State, they were throwing the deep ball. But man, once we got past that Maryland game, I guess I shouldn't say Maryland. There was the play to Reganey, the one play to Reganey against Penn State, the Penn State throw across the field to Nico Reganey. That one was probably the last one that I can remember that was real significant. Did we have any big plays against Nebraska? And I guess I'm thinking super explosive plays. What's the last super explosive play Iowa has converted on, Don?
I can't recall, to be honest with you. It's been a while.
I don't mean to be facetious. I'm actually wondering that. If anybody remembers, let us know, because I remember the play against Penn State. There wasn't anything against Wisconsin. There wasn't anything against Purdue. Again, we're not talking special teams returns. I know Iowa had a couple good runs against Purdue and special teams that were for naught. But, Nebraska, there wasn't really much of anything. This team has found ways to win. That's what I've talked about it with Mark Rogers himself, that this is one of the more incredible 10-2 years, Don. And I'm not saying it's been one of the more pretty 10-2 years, but the fact that Iowa was able to get to 10-2 despite some of the struggles is really incredible. Steve Sport says Kentucky's defense might not be ranked highly, but doesn't the fact they play in the most talented conference skew the numbers a bit? I don't think so, Don, and here's why. Here's, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, but if you want to really delve into Kentucky's schedule, and I am not trying to, I'm just calling it like I see it, and sometimes I get in trouble for doing that. But Don, if you look at these two teams, if I was an unbiased college football fan and I was looking at these two teams, I might say this is the worst Citrus Bowl matchup in the history of the game. And I say that not because I'm trying to be an Iowa or Kentucky hater, but you look at Iowa's 10-2 and you look at Kentucky's 9-3. The case could be made that that Kentucky has the weakest of any 9-3 team, and the weakest strength of schedule of any 9-3 team, and Iowa has the weakest strength of schedule of any 10-2 team. I'm not trying to, pee anybody's Cheerios here, Don, but Kentucky. So to put this in perspective, according to one metric, Kentucky is 67th in the FBS strength of schedule. And you say, well, that's not too bad. Well, that is third to last in the Power 5, and it's behind the likes of South Florida, Tulane, and Navy, who we brought up earlier. The only Power 5 teams that is ahead of is Boston College and Pitt, who play in an ACC conference with a down Clemson, a down Florida State, and a conference really that was behind all year. So I'm not trying to downplay Kentucky. I do think Iowa has a good chance of winning this game, because I look at that schedule that Kentucky played, and they did not play a tough SEC schedule, Don. They did play Georgia, but they avoided Alabama. They avoided Arkansas. They avoided Ole Miss. I mean, they did not really play the toughest teams in that conference.
Right.
Besides Georgia.
Steve, I would simply remind Steve Sport of this. He's a big Kentucky fan, so I'm sure he knows this. One dirty little secret of the SEC is they only play 8 conference games. Here we are with 14 teams in the Big Ten, and we play 9 conference games. The SEC doesn't want to play 9 conference games because that allows all the other teams to schedule one more non-conference game. And for that matter, you probably know this, Corey, the week before the rivalry weekend, which is typically game 12 for all those teams, game 11 is almost always, I believe to every last team it is, a non-conference game in November against an opponent that is not even supposed to be on the field with their SEC opponent.
New Mexico State.
New Mexico State in the case of Kentucky. So that's one way to get ahead, of course, is schedule 4 teams you can beat. And by that, I mean 4 non-conference games that you're confident you can win. And in the case of Kentucky, correct me if I'm wrong, now maybe Louisville's an annual game. I don't know. Maybe that's a rivalry game that's always played. You may know better than I do, Corey, if that's on the schedule every year.
Game. I don't know, but it was the last game of the season, so I'm assuming it is. I'm sorry I don't know more about the Kentucky-Louisville football rivalry, but I'm assuming it is.
That would make some sense, but it'd be a little bit odd to play it in game 12, but maybe that's the way it's always played. I don't know. But my point is we always have Iowa State on our schedule, so we have 9 conference games plus Iowa State. 10 out of 12 are going to be pretty difficult games for us. And that only leaves 2 non-conference, and typically that's against maybe a Mid-American team and a Mountain West team, something like that. So is it any surprise that our strength of schedule is better than Kentucky's? No. Just out of curiosity, where was ours? Theirs was 67, you say?
Let me pull that up, Don.
I'm assuming we were in the 30s or 40s maybe, or maybe better.
Well, that's a good question here. It was not much better. It was higher. Iowa's schedule was tougher, but okay, here it is. Iowa was. Oh, no, I don't have it. I lost it.
It's okay. We know it's better than Kentucky,
it wasn't much higher. And again,
right.
They're relative. That's why I say, there are different metrics out there that you can measure strength of schedule with. And you look at strength of schedule preseason, Iowa was not very low on the list. But when you see Indiana, who might be the worst Power 5 team in the nation, I mean, maybe that's being exaggerated. Maybe that's exaggerated.
They're on the low end, that's for sure.
You're terrible, Don. They didn't win a game in the conference.
Right.
And we thought they were a top 15 national team. I mean, so it's all I'm saying is neither of these teams played Murderer's Row. And they played in the 2 toughest conferences in the country, Don. I'm not trying to downplay the Big Ten or the SEC. These are the 2 best conferences, and I don't think there's any question, in the country. But Iowa and Kentucky probably had the 2 weakest schedules of any teams within those conferences.
So maybe this would be a good time for our ADs at Kentucky and Iowa to write a thank you note to the scheduling office then.
Absolutely. Well, Don, you mentioned, I don't mean to downplay the Louisiana Monroe mention that you threw out there earlier, but you're right. ULM has had good teams or decent teams. They weren't good this year, though. All right. They were 2-6 in the conference, 4-8 overall. And that was Kentucky's first opponent. Their second opponent was actually a good team. Or I should say a good team, relatively speaking. That was not Jackson State. I lost the schedule. It was Chattanooga. Chattanooga
was the third game.
Yeah, excuse me. I meant second non-conference game. Second non-conference game was against Chattanooga, who I think you would attest to this. That's a good FCS program. I'm not going to say it's a power. That's a good FCS program, but Kentucky only won that game by 5. They did blow out Louisiana Monroe. They blew out New Mexico State, who was New Mexico. New Mexico State was 1-11?
That sounds about right.
2-10. They were 2-10, and then Louisville is a good team, but not great. That's a good win, though. That might be their best win on the schedule, Don, to go on the road, rivalry game last week of the season, and blow out Louisville on the road. That's their best win, Don. Prove me otherwise. Who else have they beaten that is a real impressive win? Missouri's a bowl team. They won that game, but again, Missouri's 6-6. Same with Florida.
When they knocked off Florida and LSU, people felt good about those, but it was a little bit like us knocking off Indiana.
Exactly, and Iowa State.
Yeah.
And like I said, Missouri's a good win, but I just that's part of the reason why I do feel somewhat confident. I will say when I watched the game back, I brought up Will Levis. What he did offensively, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a quarterback that Iowa has played this year, Don, that would compare to Will Levis. Again, Iowa's faced him before, but it would have probably been Adrian Martinez had he played. But given the fact that he didn't play, I mean, it wasn't Penix, it wasn't Purdy, it wasn't Centeo, it wasn't Crum.
It was
Probably
Clifford, except Clifford only played for a little less than 20 minutes.
All right, so Don, there's my point. So he's a Penn State quarterback. Obviously, he fits in the Penn State mold. He was at Penn State. And as I'm watching the Louisville, Kentucky game back, I'm thinking to myself, good Lord, this guy's running all over the field. He's athletic. He's their best weapon. You could argue Robinson is, but man, Levis on the ground is spectacular. So that's my concern because Iowa, as you know, struggled mightily with Sean Clifford until he went out. And Iowa refused. We talked about it going into the Penn State game. Will Phil Parker deploy a spy on Sean Clifford? The answer to that question was no. We never did. And I think we all can agree Iowa got very fortunate that Taquan Roberson had to sub into the game for Sean Clifford because Penn State was running up and down the field on us. So I don't think Kentucky's strength of schedule, it wasn't very good. So 9-3 might really look good on paper, but I don't think it's probably, again, I think all 9-3 teams you could say are good football teams, but that's probably one of, if not the worst 9-3 teams. If I had to line them all up, again, I haven't done that. But what does scare me is Will Levis on the ground because I don't know anybody else that Iowa has faced. Tagovailoa is not comparable because Levis does have the arm and he's physical. He's a physical runner. He's got speed. He's a really good quarterback back there. So is there anybody else that I'm missing that would compare to him on Iowa's schedule, Don?
Not off the top of my head, Corey. Let me mention this about Levis because I went back and looked. I was curious because I suspected he didn't play very well at all against Iowa last year. I knew the game was 41-21. I knew he'd started the game and then been taken out at some point. I think I mentioned to you primarily why he was taken out. They'd lost the ball twice. I believe the first two were both strip sacks, I think. And the third one was a fumble. I believe it was on some kind of run play on the part of Levis. They did recover that one in the third quarter, but at that point, the coach had had enough. He made a change, and in came, you know who came in? Of course, Clifford came in. This might surprise you and make you a little bit nervous, Corey. Would you have an idea what Levis's numbers were while he was in there? He threw 13 for 16 against us for just a little over 100 yards. The yardage wasn't really anything to write home about. He did run the ball, I believe it was 9 times for maybe 30 or 40 yards plus yardage. And of course, there were some sack yardage in there too. So he did run the ball with some effectiveness against us. The best thing we did in those games, we created turnovers again, which made a difference. And I think we were pretty darn good in the red zone too. We took advantage of our scoring opportunities and put points up at the same time. We scored 21 points in the second quarter. It was 24-7 at the half. So effectively, that's a 3-score game. Of course, it's going to be hard for anybody to come back from that at halftime. And Penn State wasn't able to do it either.
Yeah, so I do have the numbers here because I'm curious. Iowa, did you look further back, Don? Because Iowa has, I think they played Levis in didn't Levis play in 2019 as well?
I don't know. I didn't check 2 years ago. I knew that he played against us a year ago. And this should give us a little bit of concern in the mind of the Penn State offensive coaches. Levis was the better option over Clifford. And I remember Clifford like you do. I was concerned about him playing all day long because he was playing very well through the first third of the game.
All right, so I just pulled it up here. He did not play in 19. Levis did not play in 19 against Iowa. Sean Clifford did. But you're right, in 2020, the final numbers for Levis, 13-16 for $106. And then I was thinking he got some time, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm just double checking one other thing here. Yeah, I guess the last year was the only time for Levis. And what year is Levis? Is Levis an upperclassman, Don?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure what year he came out of high school. I suspect this is not his senior year because I haven't heard anybody wondering if he's going to leave.
He's a
so
junior.
I'm guessing he's got at least this year and next year.
He's a junior, and he is from Connecticut. So, Don, were you involved with recruiting? Were you at Connecticut at the time when he was in high school?
I believe I was already gone. You know, my last fall was 15. I retired in January of 16. So he was still an underclassman in high school at the time. Where did he go to high school? I'm curious.
I just went off of it. Let me find it. While we're finding that, Don, according to Lewis Papp, Miami just pulled out of the Sun Bowl. So
I don't like the way this is trending.
No, I don't. I don't either. It's just it's a disappointing situation. All right, Will Levis. Let me find his recruiting page, and I'll be able to tell you. Yeah, Iowa was high on him, Don, and I didn't realize that. According to Kirk Ferentz, it sounded like Iowa really thought they were going to grab him, and then of course Penn State comes in late and ends up getting him. So he was from Xavier. He went to Xavier High School.
Okay.
Is that a significantly big high school in the area?
That's a good program. Yeah. I do recall that they offered him because of his performance in camp right here on our campus, or at least on some campus. I assumed it was here, but maybe not. Maybe it was our coaches at some other camp elsewhere. But I believe it was on our own camp, right here on our own campus as an underclassman.
Yeah. Okay. Lewis Papp. Let's mention this, and we can circle back around to finish on the Iowa game. Lewis Papp says Michigan is winning it all. Go blue, baby. Is Michigan going to win it all? Any thoughts? We haven't talked about the playoff, Don, but so far, at least my mindset, and maybe this is tricky, but I don't think so. Alabama's beating Cincinnati. I don't want to see that happen, but I don't think Cincinnati has the horses. Maybe I'm going to be proved wrong, but I think Alabama wins that game comfortably. Georgia, Michigan. I picked Georgia in that game.
I lost you for a second there, Corey, but I think I know what you're saying. If you put a gun to my head, I would predict that Georgia's going to beat Michigan, and I would predict that Alabama's going to beat Cincinnati, and we're going to have a rematch. I hate for that to be the way I feel, but I'm just being honest. One of my fears for Michigan, the word's out now, the way Michigan played against Iowa in the first quarter, they might do that all over again, and more power to them if they try. But you can bet that Georgia's going to be alert for possible trick plays early in the game. They're going to be alert for Michigan doing their best to try to generate some big plays early on. Of course, Georgia doesn't give up many big plays to anyone. And they're going to be cautious with how they attack Michigan's offense. I don't think you're going to fool them with a flea flicker or a reverse pass, something like that. They're going to be very cautious because they've already been alerted from the Big Ten championship game. You better not sleep on Michigan because they're not afraid. You've heard me say before, Corey, it is not a sign of weakness to run trick plays. It's a sign of intelligence. And it's also a sign of intelligence to engineer plays that are designed to be for big yardage. Doesn't have to be a trick. Maybe it's just a well-conceived play. And you've always heard me mention the game-winning touchdown against Penn State. That was a well-conceived play. Thank God we ran it because we might have still lost the game without that play. So I give Michigan credit for being effective with their trick plays. They ran 4 of them for 159 yards. I still remember that. But they had 7 explosive plays worth 275 against Iowa. You can bet that Georgia's going to be aware of all that and be cautious, especially in the early stages of the game, because they don't want to try to play against Michigan from behind.
Kind of an interesting stat, and I don't think Mark really believes in ESPN's FPI, but he says if you do, Kentucky is 29, Iowa is 33. Don, do you care much about ESPN's FPI?
No, I don't even know how they determine it. Football Power Index, I know what it stands for, but how do they generate the numbers? I have no idea. Is it strictly computer-driven?
It's beyond me. Mark would probably know. Mark, if you're listening, give us a call. Darryl MVP says Kentucky had a -4 turnover margin against Chattanooga. I don't mean to giggle when I see this, but we almost lost to them. So that was early in the season, Don. But there's
not true.
Is that not true? Is that not true?
The only team that was +4 against Kentucky was Mississippi State. So he's wrong. I'm confident in saying that because I do this study and then I go back and I check my work too. So I'm confident that my numbers are right.
That's not right. Kentucky had three turnovers in that game. Chattanooga won, so they were -2.
Yeah.
So that's significant, but that's not -4 because it'd be hard to.
And Darrell MVP, I'm not trying to beat up on you. I appreciate that you care enough to listen to us and simply were in error when you said -4.
As a Kentucky fan, he's listening to us as a Kentucky fan.
Right.
And okay, Joe Welsh compliment. Good to see Don the Goat back. He is back, Don. You're back on the plaque.
Thank you, Joe.
Let's see here. Erica says, third down conversions. Oh God, listen. You must have brought up Iowa needing to convert on third down. I think the key there is Iowa has to keep it short yardage situations. We don't want to ever. I don't care who you're playing. Iowa does not have the personnel to be competing 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15. Right? I mean, that's just doesn't. And I'm not. I've never been a lobbyist for running the ball on 2nd and 21 and then 3rd and 15 like we did in the Big Ten championship game. But you understand why there isn't any confidence right now in our 3rd and long offense. So I'll just add that Iowa's got to be able to keep this into. We got to stay ahead of the chains, and we hear that all the time. That's going to be tough too because again, that's a good front for Kentucky. I don't know how many sacks they get a game. I don't know if sacks are a bit overrated.
I'm glad you asked.
You have that stat?
Yes, I do. You'll find it interesting to know. Sacks allowed. I've got defensive sacks and sacks allowed. So who sacked the opponent more often? Kentucky sacked the opponent 2.42 times per game. That puts them 55th. So they're only a little above average. Basically, round numbers 2.5 times a game. Iowa sacked the opponent 1.92 times per game. That puts us at 80th. So it's 55th for Kentucky versus 80th for Iowa. The difference is about half a sack per game. But let's go to the other category. How about sacks allowed? Kentucky only allowed 1.5 per game. We allowed 2.46 per game. That's 23rd place with the 1.50 for Kentucky versus our 87th. So when you realize you got to factor in all 4 numbers to get an idea of what the differential might be in our game. On average, we give up 1 sack more per game than our opponent. On average, they give up half a sack less than their opponent per game. And that would simply, I'm sorry, I hit that the wrong way. Sacks allowed 1.5, sacks generated 2.4. So they generate in general +1 on sacks. We generate in general -1/2 on sacks. So that would mean statistically, it should be a differential of about 1.5 sacks. That means it's going to be either 1 or 2 difference in favor of Kentucky. That's what the numbers would say. They're very likely to beat us on sacks, even if it's only by 1. And people say, well, if it's 1 sack differential, what's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal because typically a sack means an end of a drive. Just realize that. Typically, if there's a sack, and that'd be a good study for some grad student. If there's a sack involved, obviously, if there's a sack involved on 3rd down, we're almost certain it's the end of a drive. But frankly, even if it's 1st or 2nd down, it's likely to end up as the end of a drive too, because we're in that dreaded extra long category again, whether it be 2nd or 3rd down.
Obviously, a sack on 4th down probably isn't good either, right? Okay, so we do have a caller here waiting, but Nate, thank you for this comment. He's right. 55-yard run play against Nebraska that sealed that win, Don. He's absolutely right. So there was an super explosive play against Nebraska. Right. Thank you, Nate, for reminding me of that.
And I do remember a lot of our fans that are in the Spencer camp, they said Spencer made a difference in the game because he took us down for the winning touchdown. And I had to remind everybody, Tyler had a 55-yard run that had a little bit to do with that drive.
yeah, a little bit. All right, let's get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. Hey, Coach. This is Patrick calling.
Hey, Patrick. How are you?
Great. How you guys doing?
We're rolling right along. It's we hope that more bowl games don't get canceled. I'm enjoying bowl season. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's I'm right with you. I hope that they can survive this next week.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to make a comment that I think, in kind of a simplistic form, I guess. I think the key for the Hawkeyes is going to be, can they run the ball? And then the question has to be answered is, will they miss Tyler Goodson in this game or will they not? And
Yeah.
personally, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll miss the running. They may miss his pass catching ability, out of the backfield. But I think these guys, that have played behind him, I don't think they're afraid of the line of scrimmage. I think they'll run downhill. I think they run hard. And I actually think that our run game may be a little bit better than what we've seen. And not to take anything away from Tyler. I mean, I wish him the best, going forward. But I just think that, Iowa fans are going to get a little taste here of what we're going to see next year with these young guys. And I think that that's maybe the key to the game, because if we can get some rushing yards, control the clock a little bit, you're going to give Petrus or whichever guy starting the game, which I assume is Petrus. You're going to give Petrus, an extra second, and maybe that's all he needs.
Well, I hope you're right. Now, let me ask you a question, Patrick, before you, if you had a question for Don.
Corey, I'm sorry. You cut out. I lost your question.
Can you hear me, Patrick?
Yeah.
Does it make you nervous at all that Ivory Kelly Martin is listed number 1 on the depth chart?
No.
Well, please ask me, Corey.
Yeah, does it make you
nervous? Would you ask me that same question?
Does it make you
nervous? I'm a little nervous about it. I'm a little nervous about it because he's had more of a history of fumbling than Tyler. I hope it doesn't happen, and I certainly have a great appreciation for Ivory. He's a wonderful young man. I don't have any issues at all with giving him an opportunity to be the principal ball carrier. It'd be a neat story if it worked out great for him and for us. But I am concerned because I'll say it this way. As you've heard me say before, Corey, the other team is aware of what's happened in the past. So if only because they were aware that he's coughed it up in the past, they're going to try harder to get the ball out because they think it's a good use of their energy to do so, because some backs hardly ever cough it up, and Ivory's been one that has. So it does concern me. I hope and pray. I don't have any issues at all with him starting the game. I don't doubt that he's earned that right to start it based on all the practice that's gone on and based on how his teammates feel about him. But I just hope and pray that he can protect it on game day, because if not, then we're going to lose one of our biggest advantages, and that's simply that likelihood of a big spread on turnovers.
Patrick, I don't disagree with you that I'm not concerned with Kelly Martin running the football. I think he's an excellent runner. But what does worry me, I agree with Don, and specifically with the neutralizing effect, that if he puts the ball on the turf, that neutralizes the biggest advantage that Iowa has in this game, and that is turnover margin. So I think that's a risky play by Kirk, and maybe he knows something we don't know. But when's the last time Kelly Martin's had a carry? I think it was probably the Wisconsin game. Yeah,
I believe I read Wisconsin.
Yeah, so. But I understand what you're saying, caller, and I don't think Iowa will miss Tyler Goodson maybe as much as people think we will. I'm not trying to downplay what he's done either, because I think Iowa's got some really good talented backs behind him and coming in next year as well. But in this game, a little bit concerned on my part about Kelly Martin.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. And I'm specifically talking more about the guys behind him.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if he comes out and puts the ball on the ground, he's not going to be there very long.
No, you're right.
But they do have some talent, and if there was ever a game in the Kirk Ferentz era, which is a long one, to maybe pull out all the stops and say, hey, look, we got nothing to lose here. This would probably be the game. If you ricochet off of the Big Ten championship game, where Iowa did the one pass out of the backfield, and of course the fullback got his his feet kind of tangled up, and didn't score the touchdown. I think you guys probably both agree that, there probably should have been 4 or 5 plays in that game
Yes.
that were not quite as conservative as what Kirk likes to do.
Could not
But
agree with you more.
This game would be another one. I mean, this is another game. Hey, have 4 or 5 plays out there. Do something crazy. Do a flea flicker.
Absolutely.
I don't know if the punter can run, but do a fake punt.
Yeah.
You got nothing to lose.
And it doesn't have to be trickeration per se. Don, the play against Penn State is a perfect example. You just have a little bit of misdirection, right? The quarterback rolls right. You've got Reganey running right. He just scoots back left. And I don't want to say it's a trick play because it's not, but it's just something different. And it is frustrating. I get what Patrick's saying because it is very frustrating, the fact that you pull that play out. And I like the fact that Iowa ran the halfback pass. It should have worked. It was wide open. The fact is we didn't execute it well enough. But the fact that that's all we had in the bag is maddening for some. And I understand where they're coming from.
Right. Yeah, absolutely true.
Anything else, Patrick?
No, I just I've been a Hawkeye fan since I was 5 years old, so that dates back 60 years because I'm 65 now. So that first 15 years, I probably saw more losses than I've seen in the last 40.
Yeah.
So
perspective. You have perspective, sir.
Football, and you stick with them, win or lose, but I really hope that they just kind of push the conservative part of the play calling aside for one game, just to see what happens.
Well, I hope they don't. Here's where I'll disagree with you, and then I'll let you go, Patrick. And I know what you're saying, but I don't want them to push it aside for one game. I want them to push it aside for more than one game, because we pushed it aside for one game. We've done it. We did it against Ohio State in 17. We did it against USC in 19. The problem is we do it for one game, and then we trick ourselves into thinking we're something we're not. And we go back to thinking we can play the way we played before, and it doesn't work. So,
right. And the reason that I said one game is because it's the last game.
Right.
But,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, going forward, it's something's got to change on the offensive side. I think we all know that.
Amen.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Love the show, and enjoy the game.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely, and appreciate you giving us a call.
Maybe we'll talk again later.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right, you guys take care. Bye-bye.
That's a good call, Don. I think he makes a lot of really good points. And
that's a good Iowa fan. He's been there for good and bad times, and he brings up a good point. It's okay to be aggressive with our play calling. Matter of fact, it's an element that we're missing right now.
Yeah, and do you get what I'm saying, though, about this needs to be – this is what I fear, all right? And this is I don't know how to put this without seeming like I'm being delusional, and I've been called that in the past. But, Don, I don't want Iowa to come out there, sling the ball all over the field, win this game by 20 or 30, and then decide that, we don't need to make it. Convince ourselves that big changes aren't necessary heading into next season. I'm talking about offensively. I know this team is 10-2, and that will be the apologist that argues, well, you can't say they need big changes. They were 10-2. Anybody that has looked at the offensive numbers has to admit that there needs to be some significant changes, because whether that's personnel, play calling, clock management, all of the above, coaching, whatever it is, there need to be changes because the offensive numbers are not good. So what I don't want is for Iowa to come out here, sling the ball all over the place, win this game comfortably, and then convince ourselves that, again, hey, we've got these weapons, because, again, we've seen that rodeo, and it doesn't always end well. It never ends well offensively. So that's what I hope there's a change in philosophy. But I think if we're going to see a change in philosophy, Don, and maybe a change in philosophy is not what we need, I think it would help. But if we're going to see that, it's not going to happen in bowl prep. Am I correct? It's going to happen during an off season.
Yeah. Just to offer up some statistical proof that we need to have a different mindset on offense. Let me just run through some of these, just strictly concentrating on our offense. Scoring offense, we're 96th. One reason we're 96th, though, is because of points scored by the defense. We scored 4 touchdowns on defense. Not to mention we set up some short fields, of course, with other turnovers. So scoring offense, 96th. Total offense 123rd. Rushing offense 111th. Pass offense 111th. Pass efficiency offense 117. Third down offense 109th. Fourth down offense 121st. Red zone offense 121st. Now they figure it differently than I do. That's just a percentage. Did you score or not? But I did look, just to give you a comparison, red zone offense 121st versus Kentucky 66th. But here's the discouraging part of our 121st. A full 1/3 of those, 30% of those scores were actually field goals, not touchdowns. Right. Compared to Kentucky had 10% of their possessions were field goals. In other words, they had a higher percentage of touchdown than we did, considerably higher. And yet, just in terms of percentage, we scored 72.7% of the time when we were in the red zone. We scored some kind of points. Too often it was field goals. That was 30% of them right there. So that's a concern that we weren't very good when we got into the red zone. Red zone defense, believe it or not, we were 109th. That shocked me. I don't know how it could be quite that low. And in defense of our defense, a pretty high percentage of those were field goals. They forced quite a few teams into field goals. The negative is we didn't force turnovers when we were backed up on our goal line. I don't think there were hardly any turnovers in that part of the field. Going on down, first downs on offense were 110th. Sacks allowed were 87th. So, those are numbers that are a concern. You see a recurring theme there. It's really pretty prevalent all over the board. So there are areas where we can improve. Red zone, critical downs, early downs, chunk plays. I don't know how we've been doing in terms of explosive plays, but I'm sure we're in the bottom half of the conference there too.
All right, so I'm gonna disagree with Mark on something. He comments. He's stating a fact. He says Kentucky played Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Louisville, LSU, Florida, Mizzou, South Carolina, Louisville. That's all correct. That I understand that. So I'm not saying that. Well, the metrics, again, not my metrics, but other metrics say that it's the worst SEC schedule in the conference. But here's my problem with just using the fact that they're bowl eligible teams. So Missouri, for instance, you look at their schedule, Don, and yes, they ended up in a bowl game. First of all, they lost the bowl game. Okay, they lost the bowl game to Army. But first of all, being bowl eligible, you just have to win 6 games. Half of their games.
Let's back up. 42 bowl games. That involves 84 teams. There are only 130 teams. 2/3 of the field is going to a bowl game almost.
John, 3 of Missouri's wins: Central Michigan, Southeast Missouri State, and North Texas. They're halfway to bowl eligibility before they even start the SEC. And this is not like, again, you talked about it in Iowa. And I understand you play when you play an extra non-conference game, or when you play one less non-conference game like Iowa, you have an extra Power 5 opponent, as opposed to when you play 4 non-conference games, you get Iowa State, and then you probably will schedule a Pittsburgh or someone else non-conference. But the SEC, you play 4 non-conference games. So they're non-conference. Missouri, I'm just using them as an example. Central Michigan, Southeast Missouri State, North Texas, and who am I missing here? Somebody help me on this. Who am I missing that they played?
Look at game 11. It's probably game 11.
No, not according to this. Their game 11 was against Florida.
Okay.
Why am I only counting? But they play 8 conference games, correct?
No one plays 9. In the regular season, no one plays 9.
Boston College. So Boston College, they lost to Boston College in overtime. So that was a Power 5 team, and Boston College, they were bowl eligible. That's actually somebody that Mark didn't put on the list. No, we're talking about Missouri. That's why I didn't put it on the. We're talking about Missouri. But my point is, that is not Murderer's Row either. So that's my only complaint with looking at strength of schedule that way. I look at that lineup. Tennessee, Don, ended up 7-5. Mississippi State ended up 7-5. LSU ended up 6-6. Florida ended up 6-6, 6-7 after their bowl loss. Mizzou, we mentioned 6-6, 6-7 after their bowl loss. And Louisville, what was Louisville? They might have been. Let me pull them up real quick. And I know we're kind of going on a tangent here, but I do think that's an interesting discussion. Louisville's 6-6, and they're scheduled to play in the First Responder Bowl against Air Force. So I don't think Kentucky's schedule, again, without having it all in front of me, it's hard to really compare. But the SEC East is not great.
Right.
As much as it's kind of like the Big Ten West, Don. And there's a reason why probably the team with the weakest schedule in the Big Ten West, I'd say Iowa without even looking at the data. And the team with the weakest schedule in the SEC, Kentucky, both playing the weaker of the two divisions in their respective conferences. And Don, how many bowl eligible teams? I'd have to look at Iowa's schedule. How many bowl eligible teams did Iowa play this year?
Well, Kent State was the bowl eligible team, right? Colorado State was not.
Iowa State was. Kent State was. That's 2. Maryland was. That's 3. Penn State 4. Purdue 5. Wisconsin 6. Minnesota 7. So 7 regular season. And then we'll see if Illinois gets into one, but we won't count them either way. And then Michigan, of course. But I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know that bowl eligibility is a great way to, and I understand what Mark's saying, and I'm not trying to well, I am disagreeing with him. Who am I kidding? So,
another question I'd have for Mark. How about going back and looking at how many Power 5 teams there are, and then asking how many went to bowl games? That's a high percentage of Power 5 teams that go to bowl games. Think about that.
Right.
It's probably 70% that go to a bowl on average.
Right. All right, and I don't think I'm missing any calls. Our line is open right now as we finish off our show, 515-758-7773. And Erica, you did bring up something here about explosive plays. I'm not counting special teams, and you don't count special teams plays as explosive plays. We're talking about offensive plays. So, yeah, Charlie Jones' 100-yard return against Illinois was an explosive play, if you want to look at it that way, but it was not an offensive explosive play. And, of course, that's what we're talking about. Mark says, I would consider Georgia to be top 5, Mississippi State top 20, Tennessee, LSU, Florida to be top 40 to 50 teams. Yeah. I mean, it's a better schedule than almost any group of 5 team. But I'm just saying when you compare it apples to apples with other SEC or Big Ten schools, it's near the bottom. All right, let's take our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa at the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. Hey, Coach. This is Dylan. I'm a Big Ten fan. I'm from SoCal though.
Oh, good to hear from you,
and,
sir.
I'm a big fan of your guys' show, and I'm also not the smartest person when it comes to offense. I was a linebacker in high school, so I know defense better than I know offense. And something that really impresses me about Iowa is the very strong defense you guys have. And I also noticed while watching Iowa, I can't remember which game it was. I don't know if it was Michigan or Penn State. But one thing that really impressed me on offense, and I might be completely off basis, but I'm pretty sure you guys can give me more insight on this. But the one thing that really impressed me was the play call. The play calling was really impressive, but I don't feel like you guys have the talent to pull that off.
You said
pull off the play calling.
Which games were you talking about where you were impressed with play calling from Iowa?
Michigan and Penn State.
Is he talking about defensive play calling?
Defensive or offensive?
Offensive. I'm super impressed by your guys' defense. I played linebacker when I was in high school. I'm not the biggest offense guy. I'm more, I'm more of a defensive.
Yeah. Well, I will
I mean?
say this. I would disagree with you in that I'm not impressed with Iowa's play calling. I haven't been impressed with their play calling. Well, there have been games where I remember I said I was somewhat impressed with Brian Ferentz and how he called the game. And I usually say that matter of factly. The Penn State and the Michigan games, there was one really play that I remember in those games that I thought were really good calls. The Penn State throw to Reganey was an excellent call, but Don, I would maybe disagree with cumulative play calling in any of those games. Were you particularly impressed, Don? You're a former play caller.
The one game over the last half of the season I was impressed with was Minnesota. You might recall.
Yeah.
And I know I was convinced going into the game, we have no chance to win this game if we don't take some shots down the field. And thankfully we did. You might recall, I think we had several different pass plays that were for big yardage. One to Charlie Jones, I remember, set up a touchdown. Another one to Charlie Jones was a touchdown, as I recall, in that game. And there were some other shots we took that paid off too. So I think, as I recall, we had maybe 4 passes that totaled 120 or 140 yards in that game. And without those 4 chunk plays, we would have lost the game. So in that game, I was impressed with our play calling. I thought it was aggressive, and it was timed up to be called at the right time.
Does that answer your question, caller?
Yeah. Also, I just wanted to say one more thing since you guys were on the topic of the bowl game. I hate the SEC. My mom's from Alabama and an Alabama fan. So despite her, I was like, I'm a Buckeyes fan. So good luck to you guys. And honestly, I feel like this is a shoe-in game for you guys, and I don't want to offend any Kentucky fans, but I don't know. I feel like this is an easy game for Iowa. Good luck, guys.
Appreciate it, caller. And I wouldn't call it necessarily an easy game, Don, but I do share the slight disdain for the SEC that our caller does. Care to agree or disagree with me, Don?
I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Do you like the SEC?
I have a lot of respect for them, for how those teams at the top of the conference standings play. You know, I think year in and year out, Alabama and Georgia are going to be very difficult to play. Those two come to mind above and beyond anyone else. But let's not forget A&M's a dangerous team. Arkansas is a dangerous team. Ole Miss is a dangerous team. You know, I'm leaving someone out that deserves to be up there. Most years, Florida's a dangerous team. Tennessee, of course, is explosive. So many of them are good, solid teams. But having said that, they don't all play each other. And that's smart on their part because they can schedule 4 non-conference opponents. And my guess is hardly any of those 4 games are home-and-home rivalries like Iowa State versus Iowa. Typically, they bring 4 people in that they can beat and pay them, and they end up in those cases with at least 7 home games, if not 8.
All right, Ray asks, this is a serious question, and I don't have an answer to it. He says, why would Iowa let the Orlando Hawkeye Club let fans greet them coming off the plane today with COVID spiking? I don't have an answer for you, Ray. Don, I didn't know that happened. Again, I'm just relying on what Ray is commenting here. I have to say, I wouldn't think that would be a great idea, though, given the fact that whether you want to believe that the Omicron variant is a serious health issue or not, we're not addressing that. We're talking about the fact that it is putting games at risk, Don. Whether it should or shouldn't, you have the right to your opinion, but it is putting games are getting canceled because players are testing positive. And I know Iowa has 6 players that are unvaccinated. That's their right. But I'm just saying it's a valid question because you don't want this game to get canceled for any reason. And certainly right now the games are getting canceled because of players testing positive.
Yeah. I wonder with the testing, can they tell if it was if you're positive for Delta or Omicron? I'm assuming they can tell.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know if they know on the spot or if the university knows or how that works, but they absolutely know. I mean, all that data goes, the CDC monitors which variant is prominent and which one's not. So yeah, that's all tracked. I really don't know the ins and outs of it. Destiny Pirate, I know he's from the Okoboji area. He says, my son and I are going, even with offensive trepidations. We aren't fair weather fans. Well, Florida weather does help. Come on, Hawkeyes. I agree with you. That is a big plus of being able to bowl down in the Florida area. And we do have a couple callers waiting, so we'll get to our first one. Thank you for calling Iowa at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Joe from Kentucky. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing good,
Hi,
Joe. You're a Wildcats fan.
I am. I have a lot of respect for Iowa, too. Of course, I know you all probably talked about our coach and his Iowa roots, so we're somewhat familiar with Iowa. But
absolutely.
I had a couple of questions. So I want to know about your kicking game in terms of punting and field position, and also, field goal kicking. What does Iowa have to offer?
Now, Don, before you answer that question, don't sound like a homer.
Okay.
because I know Don is, and I'm high on him too, caller. Don is very high on Iowa's kicking game, and rightfully so, because Caleb Shudak, Iowa's place kicker, this may be the best kicker Iowa's had since Nate Kading, and possibly better than Nate Kading. Is that fair to say, Don?
Yes, I think that is fair to say. And I say that realizing poor Caleb missed one against Michigan, as we know. Still, when you look at his body of work over the entire season, especially when you factor in all those kicks that are 50 yards and beyond, he's got an incredible percentage even on long distance. It's kind of ironic that 2 of his 3 misses are shorter kicks.
Right.
But they were both right hash, as I recall. And as you've heard me say before, most right-footed kickers do not want to be on the right college hash. Of course, the college hash is wider than the pro hash. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but it is. And it's an extreme angle sometimes. And lo and behold, the ball was just a little bit wide against Michigan, but that's all it took. I think I don't know much at all about Kentucky's place kicker. I find it hard to believe that he's as good as ours. I'd take ours over theirs. I'm confident in saying that. This will surprise you a little bit, though. Net punting, Corey, because I know you like our punter. Yeah. We have a very slight edge. We're 33rd. Kentucky's 38th.
Are we talking a total net yardage off punts, or
no net punting? Now, let me explain how they get. So I went through and crunched the numbers just to be sure I knew what the NCAA is doing. Here's what net punting is. I don't remember the exact number of punts and all that, but I do know how they came up with their average. Our net punting average is 41.01. Now, you might be surprised it's not better than that, because truthfully, there's been very little return yardage against us. But here's why it's as low as it is. When you have, I think we had 11 touchbacks on the season. So understand, we killed a lot of punts inside the 20, but there were 11 punts that went into the end zone. Let's imagine we're punting from midfield, okay? That statistically, for the punter, that's counted as a 50-yard punt, right? Because it went to the goal line. But the net punt is only 30 because the ball comes back out to the 20. So on those 11 punts, we were only credited with the punt that went effectively to the 20-yard line. That's how the average went as low as it did, 41.01, which is still good. It's 33rd out of 130, so it's almost in the top quarter. But the bad news for us, Kentucky's just a little bit behind us. They're 40.77. We're 41.01. So the kicking game is a push in terms of net punting. And I have to believe, I know he does. Charlie, I'm pretty sure, has better numbers on the season than the Kentucky returners on punt. And I'm even more confident that he has better numbers in terms of kickoffs. Incidentally, you heard me say in the Michigan game, Michigan's such a good team. I found myself hoping if the ball comes down on the goal line, I would hope we give Charlie the green light to return the kick. And I realize Michigan's, I have no doubt they got above average coverage unit, but still, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be able to corral Charlie. Right. And as we know, he went 100 yards. I can't remember who it was against now, but that was a huge play, of course. And same thing for the bowl game. I have no idea. Maybe Kentucky's way above average in terms of coverage, but it is a bowl game. It's a reward for the players and the fans. So I'd like to believe, unless their kicker has great hang time, that we give Charlie the green light to return kicks that are coming down, somewhere inside the 5.
And
I'm not talking about bringing them out of the end zone. I'm just talking about returning them rather than fair catching them.
As a reference caller, the Iowa's punter, Tory Taylor, I think has punt a lot more traditional since he got blocked against Northwestern. Am I right in saying that, Don? Because he's typically a rugby punter, but he's punted a lot more traditional these last few weeks.
Yes.
Great. Listen, thanks a lot. Really enjoy your show.
Appreciate the call, sir.
Corey, let me say one thing about the kicking game. With all that discussion we've already had about it, not knowing as much about Kentucky as I'd like to, I would think we have at least a slight edge in the kicking game over Kentucky.
Absolutely.
And hope it'll play out that way. I think it probably will.
Ray says that he hopes UK stands for Great Britain, not Kentucky. Or excuse me, means Kentucky, not Great Britain. I apologize. Durrell MVP, somebody brought up Kentucky's defensive linemen, their D tackles. Josh Preskel? He blocked a field goal against Florida. That changed the game. And have you looked at Kentucky? Have you been impressed with obviously Kentucky's line on both sides is pretty darn good. Their offensive line is rated by Pro Football Focus, who I don't respect at all anymore as far as rating anything.
Yeah, that's with one of the highest grades too.
I don't trust Pro Football Focus to rate anything in college football. Nothing. I just don't trust him to rate anything. So let's get to our next caller. He's been on hold patiently. Thank you for calling Iowa at the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Lee from Fairfield.
Hey, Lee. How are you, sir?
Good, Corey. I hope you and Don both had a very nice Christmas and are getting ready to obviously celebrate the new year, hopefully with a Hawkeye victory to get things rolling into 2022. Going back to the caller earlier, mentioned the starting running back in place of Goodson. Obviously, Iowa, like most colleges, isn't going to have just one running back featured in the game. So talk about who else is going to be in the rotation, in your opinion.
Let me just throw my 2 cents in there, Don, and then you can go ahead. My guess is that Gavin Williams will lead the team in carries. I could be wrong on that, but that would be my hunch here. Don, your thoughts?
Yeah, I suspect that he'll end up with more carries than Ivory. Ivory may prove us wrong because obviously if Ivory has the first chance to play and does good things, then he's going to be rewarded with more snaps and more carries. I'll say it this way. If Ivory's got more carries than anyone else, I suspect that's a really good sign for our offense because he's the guy starting the game. If he's getting more carries than anyone else, I would suspect it's because we're moving the ball and protecting some kind of lead as the game plays out.
Yeah, and let me just add this, caller, a concern that I have as well. So I'm concerned about running back, not necessarily just because Tyler Goodson left, because I agree with our caller earlier that I don't think Tyler Goodson's – obviously he brings an explosive element. We've seen him knock off some big runs in the passing game or in the pass receiving game and, of course, on the ground as well. But depth is a problem. Depth is a problem because so say Ivory Kelly Martin comes out in the first quarter, Don, for the sake of this argument, and fumbles the football. Okay, so we can assume, I think it's safe to assume, he fumbles the football in the first quarter, he's done. He's not coming back in the game. I mean, you cannot have that in the game. We've said this how many times. So he comes out of the game in the first quarter. You're left with 3 scholarship running backs, Don. Now, maybe there's another one they're working in bowl prep because of this situation, because Goodson left. But you're literally dealing with Gavin Williams, LaShawn Williams, and Devin Hilson out of Des Moines, who's never ran the football once at this level. So depth could be a problem. And you know how quickly running backs can go down. They say you lose a guy or 2, things could get very interesting because of lack of depth.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong too, Corey, but LaShawn, I believe you can count his carries on one hand.
Yeah, pretty close. He's only played garbage. I mean, maybe he played some somewhat significant snaps. I think it was the Kent State game when he got playing time because of Kelly Martin's struggles. But you're right. It hasn't been more than 5 or 6.
Yeah. Well, we both have. We've talked about it in the past. I think Gavin has shown good promise. We've had a tendency to even play him some in short yardage in a few of these games. I think just simply because he's got a few extra pounds than Tyler ever did. And maybe there was some belief that he actually would give us a better opportunity on 3rd and short to convert. So I don't doubt for a second that Gavin's going to give a good account of himself in the game. I'm not so confident with LaShawn simply because I haven't seen him. And even though I have great respect for Ivory for the commitment he's made to Iowa football through the years, I'm still concerned, just strictly based on the history in those last games that he played in.
Do you think the fullback will get a little bit more carries in this game?
I hope so, and it wouldn't surprise me that he does. You know, we've got just an old-fashioned play, what we used to call F-scoop back in the day, a fullback dive. That's a good sound play, and you've also seen us run the belly pitch off that. You remember the misdirection play where we fake one way and flip it back to the back, heading the other way. That's a good play, and we've even shown a false read up front with our offensive line, a sucker play as we call it. You know, the hats go one way and the ball goes the other way. That's good football for those teams that read hats. And a lot of defensive fronts read the hats of the offensive linemen. So you might see some of that. I don't doubt for a second that Potterbaum's going to carry the ball a few times, and it's probably going to be in general in critical down short yardage when he does.
Sure. A couple of weeks ago, I called and mentioned to Corey, and it wasn't when you were on the program, Don, that I had talked to Coach Ferentz a few years back when they had started the two divisions in the Big Ten. And I said, wouldn't it make more sense to count just your games in the division toward the division championship? I know it's not done that way in football and baseball, but for instance, Nebraska played all the heavyweights in the East. We didn't play most of the heavyweights in the East. We played Penn State. And I know, Corey, you mentioned it might create more ties, which head-to-head then would come into play. But what would you think of that, Don?
Well, I understand, you know, what they don't want to have. They don't want a divisional champ to be a flash in the pan. They'd like to think they've proven themselves over 9 games versus 6. You bring up a good point. What's better than those records in 6 games where everyone on the West has played everyone? And as you know, the crossover games, sometimes there's a pretty big disparity in those 3 crossover games from one team to the next. So here's what I wish they would do, and I think they made an attempt to back in time. I even asked Kirk this one time. I said, as far as crossover games go, couldn't we assign them on a 2-year basis? In other words, if you play a crossover game, if you play these 3 teams as crossover games 1 year, the next year, couldn't you play those same 3 teams, obviously at the different site, and then simply assign those teams based on their relative standing in the previous season? In other words, take one out of the top grouping of 2 teams or 3. Obviously, the numbers don't work because you got 7 teams. You don't have 9 or you don't have 6. But if you could take one from the first grouping and then one from the middle and one from the bottom, then at least you could assign people. You'd have a better chance to make the schedules more equitable. I'll say it that way. I hope that makes sense to you.
Right.
And then you simply, even then is a problem because obviously 2 of those games for one team are going to be home games, and yet for another team in the West, 2 of those games are going to be road games. So it's just very difficult to make it equitable. And as a result, a few years ago, there was one team in particular that complained about it. And I won't tell you who they are, but I think I've mentioned to Corey before who it is.
Can I say, Don? Can I say who
it is? Go ahead.
Nebraska. It was Nebraska.
Right, I didn't say it. There was a complaint filed, and the Big Ten, as I understand it, said, okay, fine, we'll draw to see who those crossover games are. And maybe it was coincidental, maybe not, but wouldn't you know it, Nebraska drew a tough assignment with crossover games that year. And to my knowledge, they draw for crossover games every year, I think. I don't believe our crossover this year was different than last year. Of course, I know last year was a crazy season.
My understanding, though,
I know we don't because we play Ohio State next fall and Michigan.
But we also play Rutgers, and I believe that and I don't know how – see, Erica asked the same question. How do they decide which teams they play against each other? I think there's a typo there, but there is basically a lottery, correct? Because Rutgers is built into the schedule for at least the next 2 years. Am I correct in saying that?
I don't think so. The only reason I say that, let's throw out the COVID year, because obviously that was a goofy season. So here's my point. If the 3 crossover games we had this year, logically we should play them again next year, except at opposite sites, right? We're not doing that.
Well, no, but there is at least one that stays constant, I think, in periods, Don. Let me look this up.
Who's our one then?
Well, I don't know. Well, this year it'd be Penn State. We played them last year. We played them this year. Right?
Okay.
I don't know if we played them in 19, but see, we played them. We've played. I think Penn State. I could be wrong on this, and I may be just spouting off here, but I think there is one team in a period of time. I don't know if it's 4 to 5 years where you play that team every year. And Penn State, Iowa has played in. Let's see, they played them in 17. They played them in 16 as well. They've played Penn State almost every year: 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Don.
And we're playing them next year, right? They're on our schedule again next year. Is that true?
I'm grabbing the schedule for next year, but
I thought, wait a minute, you're telling me we play Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State?
We don't. That I think Rutgers replaces them, Don, because we play. I've got the 22 schedule right here. So you're right. We play Michigan, we play Ohio State, we play at Rutgers. Let me flip to 2023. 2023 Iowa. Their 3 games are Rutgers and Kinnick, at Penn State, and Michigan State. 2024. We play at Rutgers, and then Maryland and Indiana. So there's one game that remains on the schedule for a period of 4 to 5 years, I guess, and then it's a random drawing or lottery, however that works.
Lucky for us, it's Rutgers then in the near future.
Exactly. Huh? But it was Penn State for the we've kind of gotten the short straw. We've gotten the short straw on Penn State though over the last 5 to 6 years. So, but I remember this when this came up. This was drawn. These schedules were set 3 to 4 years ago. I remember when Rutgers was drawn for Iowa because I remember thinking, good Lord, lucky us. So, does that answer your...
You mentioned Penn State is a difficult draw. Let's face it, correct me if I'm wrong, they finished with 3 teams ahead of them this year in the East. Is that right? Weren't all 3 of those others?
And they were not good last year either, Don. And you brought up Nebraska. I think Nebraska's built-in one was Ohio State, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah, it seems like they've played Ohio State every year.
To Nebraska's credit, they played them really tough this year in Lincoln.
You're right. Does that answer your question?
They played everybody tough this year. That does. And I just want to say, go Hawks, and always enjoy listening to you and Coach Corey. So keep up the good work.
Appreciate it, Lee. Have a great night.
You too. Bye now.
Yeah, no, those are good points, Don. And I've heard him. He did call in and make that point, and I understand the argument. I think it might. Again, it's not necessarily fair. I don't know why they do it the way they do. I don't know why you have to have a built-in opponent to play home. Basically, it's home and homes for however many years. I don't know why you have to do that. But all right. We did get behind here, so I wanna. We've burned about 2 hours, so I want to end the show while we're ahead. But before we do, a couple comments that I did not want to skip over, questions specifically. Lort does say that I seem to remember Kentucky getting touchbacks almost every kickoff. I don't know if that's true or not, but that would negate an aspect of Iowa's special teams play with Charlie Jones, certainly. Let me see here. Fast outdoor food. Just spoke with a former athlete that played for Coach Don Patterson. Tell him Charlie Humphreys says hi from Dallas.
I had no idea that Charlie is living in Dallas. Charlie was a quarterback for us some years ago. And glad to know that he had the good sense to move to the Lone Star State. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely. Let me see if I see Charles. He said the same thing. Maybe Potabom gets more carries in this game. Mozart's Ghost agrees with us on Pro Football Focus looking at college. Again, not trying to diss the Iowa offensive line or Riley Moss, but some of these ratings, I don't know what they're looking at. That's just obviously it's got to be data, or it could just be some 300-pound guy in his basement running these numbers, Don, because I think Iowa was in the top 5 cumulative ratings for a unit.
When I've seen some of their grades, I've lost all respect for Pro Football Focus. I don't think they have any credibility whatsoever with how they grade.
I don't get it at all. I don't understand it at all. And if you don't know what we're talking about, just go look up Pro Football Focus's top 5 offensive line units this year, and you'll see Iowa on that list.
And Kentucky.
and Kentucky, but I think Kentucky's is for real. I
They
think.
might have earned it.
Yeah, I think maybe they earned it. Not to say that our Iowa's guys aren't working, but okay. Somebody asked us this question a while back. They want to know the answer. I know the answer to this question. Coach Don and Corey, will we see you at the game? Don, you will be at the game.
I suspect I will be at the game, yes.
I am up in the air on this at this point, so I don't have an answer for anybody. So certainly we'll be figuring out our post-game details, but stay tuned from the Hawkeye of the Storm and our YouTube channel here, Iowa, the Voice of College Football, for details on a post-game show. We will obviously recap the game, but again, details TBD, so just stay tuned. I know we were talking about Ivory Kelly-Martin, Don. Somebody asked the question, is it possible that he comes back? Eric asked, is IKM, Ivory Kelly-Martin, leaving? The answer to that question is we don't know because he has an extra year due to COVID. My understanding is that somebody asked him that question this past week, and he left the door open to return. What would your advice be, Don? If Ivory Kelly-Martin came to you and said, "What do you want me to? What should I do, Coach?" I'm not asking you to tell him what to do, but what would your advice?
My question to Kelly would be, to Ivory rather, would be, do you have an interest in a graduate degree? Because if you're going to stick around for a 6th year, it would be kind of criminal not to leave here with a graduate degree. If you're interested in going to grad school, why not let athletics pay for it if they want you to be part of the team again next year? Not to mention you have a chance to fulfill all your goals in terms of college football.
What about for this football team, Don? What about for this football team? Because it's a young unit. But
well, you're right. You're right. It's not your right to come back. I always reminding guys, it's not your right to be part of this football team. It's your privilege. And you have to earn the right to be part of the team. So, and that doesn't mean that Ivory's not deserving in so many ways, but it's just a question of numbers. You know, let's face it, we signed a recruiting class here recently, the early signing date. We're going to sign a few more guys here in early February. And it's nothing against those guys that would like to come back if they don't project to be able to help us. I'll say it this way. We can't invite them all back because maybe we're going to run out of scholarships before we do.
How many running backs do you want on a roster, scholarship backs, Don?
Well, I would think bare minimum you need 5. Bare minimum 5.
That's what we're going to – if Kelly-Martin leaves, we'll have 5. We'll have Devin Hilson, and we assume he stays at running back. There's speculation he could move positions, but you'd have Devin Hilson, you'd have the 2 Williams guys, and then you'd have Kelly-Martin – or excuse me, not Kelly-Martin. You have Jazzy Patterson and Caleb Johnson in this next class, and I'm high on both kids, but they'd be freshmen.
Yeah. I think most people probably have 6 at least. You know, if you think about the scholarship allocations, you've always heard me say 5 quarterbacks, I think, is the minimum. You need 5. It's really crazy now, of course, with the transfer portal. It's hard to ever know what your number is going to be from one week to the next. And the same could be true for running back. But I think most people would not be comfortable with anything less than 6 running backs on scholarship because, let's face it, they can go down. They're carrying the ball all the time. It's conceivable you'd have a serious run on injuries from one year to the next, and you might be forced to play your 4th-team running back just simply because of injuries. That it sometimes works out that way.
But correct me if I'm wrong, it is easier typically for a freshman to see the field at running back as opposed to some other positions.
Absolutely true.
Caleb Johnson, Jazzy Patterson could play next year, and maybe that's not as big of an issue as maybe another position.
Yeah, you should certainly figure those guys in as part of the 5, the minimum of 5. If you're sitting at 5 and 2 of them are 2 true freshmen, that's not ideal either because that means you only got 3 upperclassmen.
Okay, so that is a question. And again, I'm high on Jazzy Patterson and Caleb Johnson, but we have no idea what those guys are going to do at this level. All right, we'll end it with this. All right. I was not going to address this. It's not the elephant in the room. I've talked about it ad nauseum with Mark. But Hawkeye Howard says, any word on if we are looking in the portal for a QB? And then I see a comment here below. Steve says, most of the Power 5 portal QBs have been signed to other teams. That's not necessarily true, Don. Now, first of all, I just want to say this. I have not heard anything about Iowa going after a transfer portal quarterback. I think it's fair to say, and I'm not going to put you on the spot here, Don, but I think it's fair to say that is a position that would be logical to look into the portal and see what options are out there, because it hasn't been the strongest position on the football field. And again, that's not backstabbing Spencer or Alex, but certainly I would say that's a position where you have a need. As far as quarterbacks who are in the portal right now, and I know what Steve is saying, there have been some quarterbacks that have been gobbled up, specifically Bo Nix heading to Oregon from Auburn. Of course, we know Quinn Ewers heads from Ohio State to Texas. But let me run through just some of the available, as of tonight, Sunday night, some of the available quarterbacks that are in the portal. So Levi Williams is one from Wyoming. I know he's not Power 5, but ran for 200 yards the other night, Don, against Kent State in the bowl game. He's an athletic kid. Braxton Burmeister started at Oregon, ended up at Virginia Tech. He was a starter at Virginia Tech. He's still in the portal. Casey Thompson, starter at Texas, is in the portal still. Obviously, we've talked about Zach Calzada at Texas A&M. He is still currently in the portal. There were reports he was going to commit to Pittsburgh, Don. Keaton Slovis ends up going to Pittsburgh, so I would assume Zach Calzada is still available, or at least is not announced where he is headed. Cameron Ward may be the highest recruited transfer portal quarterback. Again, not Power 5, but from Incarnate Word, and just slung it all over the football field. Max Johnson is going to Texas A&M. Michael Penix is headed to Washington. Tyson Fumichan, he's another one. Now, he did not start at Clemson. He is still available as of right now. Adrian Martinez is headed to Kansas State. Deuce Hogan is still out there. Jack Plummer has not committed to anywhere. Plummer, there were rumors he was going to commit to Cal. That has not been official yet. Of course, we know Spencer Rattler is headed to South Carolina. And my guess, Don, is there will be more. Jack Miller, of course, also from Ohio State to Florida. But there will be more because, let's be honest, this is a fluid situation. And with bowl games, we've seen, for instance, Wyoming, they got some issues there at Wyoming. And I don't know what's going on there, but they have had a ridiculous number of transfer portal entries over the past few days alone. And again, I don't know why that is. And let me pull up Wyoming here because I am curious. Of course, Wyoming out of the Mountain West and currently in the portal. And I just love dealing with ads. Let me pull up Wyoming here. Do you have any thoughts on this subject, Don, while I'm pulling this up?
Yeah, let me mention while we're talking, a guy that really impressed me a lot is the A&M quarterback. And I'm basing it strictly on how he played against Alabama. That game was won by A&M to a fairly significant amount by the play of the quarterback. If you go back and look at the game, he played very, very well under the pressure of playing against Alabama. He really made an impression on me because I thought that guy's the backup. That is so impressive that he would play that well. He was tough. He ran hard. He made plays when he had to. He had a lot to the outcome of that game. And let's not forget, too, just talking about the argument for considering a transfer quarterback, let's face it, we don't have to look too far to find a team called Kentucky that really benefited from a transfer from Penn State. Because I'm sure the Kentucky fans would tell you that the Penn State transfer has made a difference in their team. He's had a lot to do with their success. They're above average on offense in large part because of him.
Don, you know, Joe Burrow always gets brought up going from Ohio State to LSU, and kind of knock on wood, he goes for over 500 yards today against the Ravens. I know, yeah, I know he won a national championship, he won a Heisman, but it's a perfect example of a kid who did transfer from a prominent program to a prominent program and has had tons of success doing it.
And when he left Ohio State, the Ohio State fans didn't even worry too much about him leaving.
Yeah, you're right.
Think about that. They weren't concerned. There wasn't a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth when Joe Burrow transferred because they were pretty sure he wasn't quite good enough. I think he would have probably played really well for the Buckeyes if he had that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm just looking through here. So, again, Wyoming, I don't have the official list in front of me, but Wyoming has had, I believe, 2 quarterbacks enter the portal. C.J. Colden, a 3-star defensive back who played a lot. I don't know if he was a starter, but had 115 tackles. He's entered the portal as a grad transfer. Defensive back Azizi Hearn, who went from Arizona to Wyoming and had 106 tackles during his career, has entered the portal. I mean, there's just a lot on here, and I could continue down the list, but Wyoming's got some problems, which is interesting because, and I have nothing but respect for Tim Polasek, but if anybody doesn't remember, Tim Polasek, Iowa's former offensive line coach, is the quarterbacks coach and the offensive coordinator at Wyoming. So you wonder what's happening there in Laramie, but certainly Levi Williams would be a possibility. I've been advocating for Zach Calzada, at least to show some interest in that kid for some time now. And then I would say the kid from Texas as well. And if the kid from Texas, Thompson, if he ends up going to TCU, you wonder, will Max Dugan transfer, an Iowa kid, and perhaps he would be on Iowa's radar as well. But I have not heard any rumblings. Don, typically, and you've been here before, you've pursued transfer kids in the portal before. How does word get out? Who leaks word on these things? Because you hear all the time. Sometimes it's a parent that says, well, my child has been contacted by this team, etc. But usually these things get around, and I have not heard anything about Iowa being connected to any transfer quarterbacks.
Yeah. I don't know what the NCAA policy is as it relates to the transfer portal. I don't know that once you've officially entered the portal, to my knowledge, Corey, you are available to any and all coaches that can contact you. In other words, I don't think you're not violating any rule if you contact a kid. If he's officially in the portal, then you have license, you have the right or the privilege of being able to contact him directly. Now, in response to Steve Sports' entry there, most of the Power 5 portal quarterbacks are signed to other teams already. To my knowledge, there is no signing that goes on. I know this in the old days when you transferred, there was no national letter of intent for a transfer. You simply showed up at the school if you chose to do so, and once you were on campus, you signed the scholarship papers. There's no binding document that requires you to go to that school. There's nothing the equivalent of a national letter of intent. That's strictly for high school or junior college kids. But for a transfer from an FBS school, it doesn't matter, from an NCAA school to another NCAA school. I'm talking about a 4-year school, of course, not junior college. To my knowledge, there's no binding document that you sign before you go there. You simply make that commitment that you're going to go, and then when you get on campus, then you sign your scholarship papers that entitles that school to provide you with your scholarship money that you're entitled to. So my point is, you could change even at the last minute.
Don, what would be your top 2 or 3 positions of need if you're Tyler Barnes, or if you're maybe not Tyler Barnes? I don't want to put that on you, but just it's Iowa in general. What positions would you say, well, perhaps it would be wise to look into the portal?
I wish we could find a transfer to play offensive tackle. And I'm not trying to beat up on our tackles versus the guards. I'm simply saying I think the harder position to fill is an offensive tackle that's got to block an edge rusher all day. An edge rusher may be a little bit like the guy from Michigan. That's a problem. So I'd like to think we could, this is really wishful on my part, but I'd love to think that we could sign an offensive tackle that would be good enough to play, ideally to play left tackle, because that's the blind side. As you know, if you're a right-handed quarterback, that you're most vulnerable to that rush that's versus your left tackle. So I wish we could find a guy that could be left tackle, and that'd give us a chance to move our left tackle to any of those other positions inside, or maybe to the other tackle position, of course. So I'd love to have another offensive tackle. If he was strictly a right-handed guy and could only play on the right side, that's okay. Because let's face it, you heard me say before, you need 2 really good corners, because you can attack one corner with one football. You don't have to have having one great corner is not enough. You got to have 2. Same thing would apply to tackle, of course. You need one on either side. As you've heard me say already, a little more important to protect your blind side than your front side. But ideally, you need to protect against both those edge guys. And in an ideal world, you have 2 accomplished players that are playing offensive tackle, not 1. So that comes to mind. Beyond that, I'd love, especially if we're so unsteady at quarterback, we don't know. I mean, Deuce Hogan's gone now. Are we guaranteed to have our 2 guys that played this year? Are we guaranteed to have both those back? I don't know. it's so easy for a guy to transfer nowadays. It's hard to suggest that anybody, if Padilla's dad had played at Iowa and Padilla had played for, for City High, I think he'd be less likely to transfer than him playing out in Colorado. He doesn't. My point is, he doesn't have that family loyalty that some players do have. If their father or their uncle played football at Iowa, that's one more reason they've chosen to play for Iowa. So I'm just concerned going forward. What do we do if Padilla says, not to pick on Padilla, it could be Spencer. Maybe Spencer says, if we decide that Padilla has the edge in the spring, does that mean that Spencer's going to stick down? Right now, I don't care where your school is. You better be careful to be confident that your backup quarterback is going to stay with you. I heard one coach one time say, what's really important is you better feel really good about that third quarterback because the second guy's not going to stick around. So you're going to go from first to third. And in that regard, you better have three guys that you feel like you can win with because the second one may not stick around. And if he's going to stick around, the third one's not going to stick around.
We just need more competition in the room in general, whether they stick around or not. That's my opinion.
You're right.
I mean, even if it's just Levis, because we're only going to have three guys in there. It's not Hogan's not. Carson May is not enrolling early, so he won't be here till summer. You need more than three guys. You need more than the three guys they have, in my opinion. I think going out, and even if it's Braxton Burmeister, a grad transfer, if it's someone, Levi Thompson, or someone who fits the system, I'm not just saying you get anybody you can, but somebody that fits the system, even if it's just a year, that might be what's best, because if you have a lot of confidence in a guy like Joey Labus or a guy like Carson May, or maybe you're high on Marco Lainez in the class of 23, right. You need someone to be a gap filler, a stopgap, if you will, for 2022 against a schedule that, unless there's a huge leap from one of these quarterbacks, and I don't have evidence as of right now to say that there's going to be a huge leap, unless there's going to be a huge leap, I don't know how you win more than, I don't want to put a number on it, but you're not going to win 10 games. That regular season schedule next year is a gauntlet.
Well, you've heard me say before too, Corey, that one of the advantages of having nothing wrong with if you decide that you want to have a pocket passer and groom your starting quarterback to be a pocket passer, that's fine. But there is an argument to have a backup that has a different skill set. Somebody that maybe is a better runner, because now you're forcing the other team to spend some time developing plans for two different quarterbacks. Years for sure when our backup had a different skill set than the starter, and we thought it was a good thing because it gave us more flexibility within the offense. All you got to do is think back to Purdue. They played three quarterbacks against us, and I guarantee you those plays they ran against us were plays that each of those three quarterbacks worked on during the week. So going into that game, Brom knew we're going to play Plummer, and we're even going to play the third guy a little bit. And they had an idea what those plays were going to be, but we didn't know for sure. And as the game ended, I guess we kind of had an idea that they were going to run the ball with both Plummer and the third quarterback. But let's face it, they might have a certain play action pass to take advantage of what we think we know too. So is it hard to imagine that if you put a backup in that's got a reputation as a runner, it might be some kind of play action pass off of what appears to be a run play? That's just good football. And in the meantime, of course, you can still run that better runner as you see fit to create any number of first downs. Who was it? Somebody against us late in the season. I knew who it was. It was the Nebraska quarterback who we knew was a runner. Well, I'd be damned if they didn't run him on 3rd and 12 and he gained 15. Remember that? Cue draw. So there's nothing wrong with the backup having a different skill set than the starter because it gives you more flexibility to run a more diverse offense. You might have to change quarterbacks to run some of these other plays you're thinking of, but that's okay because the other team hadn't worked on them. And even after you run them that week, that means in preparation for the next game, the next opponent has to work on them too and has to come up with some kind of plan in the event that you put that backup in the game.
Another good example of a backup quarterback who transferred and has been successful is Will Levis.
Absolutely. That's what I was saying. You don't have to go any further than Kentucky to find an example of a transfer quarterback making a difference.
Just because a guy didn't start somewhere doesn't mean he's not destined to start somewhere else. There are rooms that are, I brought up Fumichan, and again, I probably shouldn't keep bringing him up because he hasn't proven himself. But a perfect example, DJ, how do you pronounce his last name, Don? The quarterback for Clemson, Ugalele or whatever his last name is.
I'm not sure either.
He was the Heisman favorite heading into the season. So are we really going to sit here and say?
I was going to give the edge to Spencer Rattler, but anyway.
Yeah, no, but him and DJ and Spencer would probably be your top two. And so I guess my point is, are we really going to put a negative mark against Tyson Fumichan because he was the backup at Clemson? So, maybe he's not the answer, but of course he was recruited by Iowa as well. The man here says, Coach, when you played, what we now call targeting what we now call targeting called the ideal hit for a defensive back, or considered an ideal hit for a defensive back. Your thoughts, Don?
Yeah, pretty much. There was a period of time when they simply said, okay, here's a receiver that's really in a vulnerable position, and here's a defender that came in and tried to decapitate the guy. There was a period of time when they would say, that was unnecessary roughness. I think they called it that back then. No targeting. Nobody's going to get ejected, but they would sometimes label that was unnecessary roughness. You had a chance to kill the guy, and you tried to. But honestly, as far as helmet to helmet went, unless it was a really, really unusual case, you've heard me say before, Corey, it's not hard to identify a malicious hit. I've used that term, a malicious hit. Here's a receiver that's absolutely exposed, and a guy comes in and hits him with the crown of his helmet to helmet. It couldn't be a more forceful contact. That's a malicious hit. He might argue he's trying to break up the pass, but there's an element there maybe where he's actually hoping, if this guy was injured and couldn't play anymore, that'd probably be okay too. So same way with quarterbacks. I think it's not that hard to protect quarterbacks, and yet it seems crazy that every time there's a good hard hit, some of which are clean hits. I saw one the other day. It was a good hard hit with the shoulder. It was not with the helmet. And yet on contact, you might assume it was targeting, but the replay clearly showed it was not helmet. They did wave it off. They still, I think, punished him for a late hit, but he wasn't ejected. So in the old days, you're right. Anything went. And here's part of the problem with the new rule too. How many times do you see a running back put his head down and take on defenders with the crown of his helmet? He does it all the time. Defenders can't do it. They can't respond in that same manner. They can't hit him head to head, helmet to helmet. Can't do it. Can't hit with the crown of your helmet. And yet the running back's going to put his head down. And you could argue that's going to be helmet to helmet contact only if the defender decides to make it that. The defender's obligation is not hit him helmet to helmet. If he puts his head down, I guess all I can do is take him on with my shoulder pads. That's what I have to do. So the advantage goes to the back, I think. And there are certain backs that run with that kind of aggressiveness. They put their head down and they don't think twice about it.
Absolutely. Final comment. Lort says the portal has waves of activity, lots of transfers at end of season, lots after spring practice, some at the end of fall camp. Keep in mind. Here's my problem, though, Don. If you're going for a quarterback, are we really going to sit here and believe that Iowa would go after a transfer quarterback during the summer or beginning of fall camp? Or would we, and I'm talking about a guy who is actually going to come in here and play right away. My belief is that the only way Iowa would be comfortable, and I'm talking about Kirk, be comfortable bringing in a transfer quarterback is if he has a spring practice with him. And that means you got to go now. You got to go after him now. Because if you hit spring practice and you don't have another quarterback, you're probably playing that coming fall season with one of the three guys you have on the roster. That would be my guess.
Here's a question for you, Corey, because you know our roster better. Do we have a third quarterback for spring football right now? Who would it be?
Labus. Be Joey Labus.
That's right.
And I've heard nothing but good things about him, but I heard nothing but good things about Deuce Hogan for a long period of time. So I'm tired of putting my faith in ghosts. I don't have any reason to think that Labus is the answer, and I don't have any reason to think that this coaching staff believes that Labus is the answer. I've heard, again, good reports from him in camp and in practice, but heck, I mean, there's a lot of proven guys in the portal still, and some of them have been. I wanted Iowa to at least reach out to Slovis and to Nix and to some of these guys. And I mean, Iowa is I know Mark has expressed this. Iowa's not a program that we would have to look at and think, well, they don't have a chance at nabbing a top quarterback. They were.
Yeah, we don't. You're exactly right. If only because of our consistently good kicking game and our consistently high level of play on defense, you would think it would be an attractive place for an offensive player to transfer to, because he could maybe upgrade the offense, whether he's a running back, wide out, or quarterback, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. So I know I probably irritated people by talking about it so much, but I say it till I'm blue in the face. I think Iowa needs to go after a quarterback in the portal. Maybe they have, but typically those reports do surface. And Don, you didn't answer my question earlier. How do those reports surface besides family leaking it to the media?
Well, I don't know what the mechanics are, but I'm assuming everybody has a compliance officer on the campus. I'm assuming a player simply goes into that compliance officer and says, I would like to officially declare for the transfer portal.
I'm talking about reports that, we hear that, okay, Bo Nix is in the portal, and we've got reports that the top 3 are these 3 schools. How are those schools that are contacting them? How is that news being leaked typically? Do you know?
I would like to believe that it would be the student athlete that's letting that information out. Okay. But it could be the high school coach, maybe. That's a possibility. It could be somebody in the media that the player has a good relationship with. He feels comfortable confiding in a particular writer. That's a possibility too.
Well, here's why I would say I'm not giving up total hope that Iowa may go after a transfer quarterback in the portal, because you see like this kid from Incarnate Word might be the highest rated quarterback in the entire portal, and right away we heard Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is all over him. And I don't think Lane Kiffin cares. I don't think Scott Frost and the Nebraska staff, they've been attached to Slovis, all kinds of quarterbacks. Right. I don't think they care. But see, Lane Kiffin and Scott Frost are the polar opposites of a Kirk Ferentz. And you and I both know, Don, that if tomorrow somebody tweets out, somebody that's, a credible source tweets out that Zach Calzada has been contacted by Iowa, that's all it would take. It would mean a firestorm here in Iowa. People would be all over that. Can we agree with that?
Yeah.
So my point is, I'm not saying that Iowa has contacted anybody, but there is that sliver of hope that if Iowa has, it may be just the Kirk Ferentz, Tyler Barnes, and this staff's way of keeping it under wraps, because it would be a distraction right now. It would be a distraction prior to the bowl game, whereas some teams don't look at it that way. Like I said, Kiffin or a Nebraska who's not even playing in a bowl game. So if you're rooting for that, like I know a lot of our listeners are, don't give up total hope yet. And there are guys left, contrary to maybe what we think. And there may be more guys that enter the portal here in the coming days. So, all right. Anything else to add this evening, Don? This has been a pleasure to talk Kentucky and everything Iowa, but anything else to add that we missed?
You mentioned, Corey, that you couldn't envision a situation in which Kirk would take a transfer after spring ball. Here's a version that could happen. Maybe after spring ball, Spencer or Alex decides, you know what, the handwriting's on the wall. They're going to go with the other guy, so I'm out of here. If we lose either one of those two, I would certainly expect then we've got one quarterback at that point that's played in the game. I would certainly expect then that Kirk, even though he would reluctantly do so, I would expect at that point he would have to look seriously about any and all available transfers that have actually played somewhere.
Okay, Erica, let me just give you my take on this. So yes, the Kirk Ferentz was asked about, his thoughts on taking a transfer portal quarterback. He said, well, you never say never. Those are his words. You never say never. But I equate that, the way I took that, Erica, and this is just how I took it. I'm not speaking for you, Don. How I took that is kind of like when your parent, when you ask your parent, hey, can I buy this, or can you buy this for me? And, you're walking throughout the store and say, well, we've got a lot more shopping to do, Jimmy, but we'll see. We'll see. The answer is no, Don. The answer is no.
I was reflecting back on my own childhood. That sounded familiar.
So I'm not, again, that comment from Kirk did not necessarily. I mean, would Kirk go up in front of the media, Don, and say, "No, we wouldn't even consider a portal quarterback"? He would never say that. Of course, you're going to say
never say never. That's pretty good advice. Never say never.
So that didn't encourage me in the least. It didn't discourage me necessarily, but it didn't encourage me at least. So, Justin says, "Do I think we're going to lose?" No, I think we're going to beat Kentucky. For the record, if you want to catch my picks, we'll be releasing those tomorrow morning. Actually, tomorrow morning for the rest of the bowl games, which include the Citrus Bowl. So, tune on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, and you can also follow From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Twitter and Facebook. Stay tuned because we'll give you details on our post-game show. And Don, I'm assuming we'll talk playoff at some point. We talked about it a little bit tonight, but I know you are a big-time playoff. I mean, you're going to watch the playoff like everybody else is. So will you be rooting for Michigan?
Yes, I will. Absolutely. And I wasn't happy with them for how the game ended, but I'm still a Big Ten fan. And I don't even know if you know this, but years and years ago, Jack Harbaugh, Jim and John's father, was the coach at Western Kentucky when I was at Western Illinois, and we had some great games. And I have a lot of respect for the Harbaugh family, for Jack, and for his sons. And I do hope that Michigan wins, absolutely, because they represent our proud conference, and they represent them so well. And it's going to be a tough assignment, but I'm just glad that they have a chance to get it done. Michigan State had a chance a while back and failed miserably, you might recall, in the Final Four. And of course, Ohio State at times has struggled with their semifinal game too. So now it's Michigan's turn. And I think the fact that Michigan hadn't played in one of these games, some people say that's a negative. I don't know that I see it that way, because this game means the world to those players, and the fact that they played well in the Big Ten championship game, which is a stage none of them had been on, and the fact that they played well against Ohio State in a showdown game, and that game had never meant so much in their years at Michigan. So if you think about it in those terms, they've overperformed each of the last two games, and I'm sure they're prepared to do it for two more. So I wish them luck. Hope it works out that way.
Can you hear me now, Coach? I apologize for that.
I got you now. Yeah, I lost you there for a second.
It's been a pleasure to talk about this game as always, and I know we're starting to come to the end of a very entertaining season. On a couple notes, we've had the highs and we've had the lows, but what else could you expect from an Iowa season? Hopefully, we get a high here on Saturday in the Citrus Bowl, and let's just hope, and again, knock on wood, that there are no COVID issues with either of these teams, because we want to see this game happen. That would be a blow. We saw the Missouri game canceled last year. I hope that doesn't happen this year. Again, I have no reason to think it will. As a reminder to everybody listening this evening, Iowa Live with myself and Mark Rogers, 4:30 p.m. Central Time every Tuesday, but this coming Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Time, right here on this channel. And then as a reminder, if you're an Iowa basketball fan, we do live post games with Coach Gary Close, who is an excellent basketball mind, a former Hawkeye coach who was actually an assistant with Coach Tom Davis back in the 80s and 90s here, and then went to a couple Final Fours with Bo Ryan at Wisconsin. So we're on after every Iowa basketball game. So we'll be on this coming Wednesday after Iowa. And you're a school that's close to your heart, Don, Western Illinois. You'll be at the Western Illinois game, correct? Iowa, Western Illinois on Wednesday?
Maybe.
Oh, maybe. I thought it was a shoo-in.
If I'm not tied up doing something else, I will be.
Okay. All right. So, but we'll be here doing a live post-game show with Coach Gary Close following the conclusion of that game. And then again, Iowa, Kentucky, Citrus Bowl, January 1st. That's this coming Saturday, 12 p.m. Central Time. It will be televised on ABC. And I think we covered it all, Don. I appreciate the time this evening, and we'll talk to you this coming weekend at some point.
I do have one other question.
Yes.
Post-game show. We haven't discussed.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out because, again, assuming you're going to be at the game, I don't know that I'll be at the game. I'm kind of back and forth on it right now. My wife and I have to talk about that again, but we're kind of waiting and seeing. I'm a little bit nervous with the situations with flights being canceled and whatnot, but we'll figure that out. I plan on doing some sort of a post game show, and if it means getting a call in from you, are you staying in Orlando?
Yes.
So would it be feasible? And we can talk about this after we go off the air, but perhaps it'd be feasible to do a show from the hotel room. Are you able to do that?
Yeah, to me that makes some sense. I don't know about travel after the game and all that, but
Right.
sometime on the night of the first or late afternoon on the first. Let's see, it's a 1 o'clock kick in Orlando, so
Correct.
the game will be over local time at about 4:30, and then travel and whatnot.
Yeah, we'll figure that out, Don. And but what people can count on is that we will have coverage here. And quick trivia question, Don: who plays at this Camping World Stadium? Do you know what team?
You're talking about professional? You're not talking about professional football.
Well, whose stadium is it? I mean, the Raymond James is, of course, the Bucs stadium. So whose stadium is the?
I don't think it's South Florida, Central Florida.
No, it's not Central Florida either. It's not Central Florida.
Okay.
Nobody. The answer is nobody.
That explains why they have 3 bowl games.
You're
Are
right.
you aware that they have 3 bowl games in that one stadium?
Well, the Cheez-It Bowl. What's the third?
They already had one already, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I don't know which one.
I guess you're right. I do remember hearing that. But I looked this up, because I thought it was Central Florida for sure, because they're in Orlando, but apparently they played there for years and don't play there anymore. I know very little about the Knights, but it's a nice stadium. It's not quite as big as Raymond James, so you'll have a good time. Have you been there before?
Maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I ever have. You said Central Florida used to play there? Or
they did.
No. Okay,
yes, they
that's
did.
probably where I played them there when I was at UConn.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Matter of
So
fact, we beat them there, matter of fact, too.
okay. Yeah. So but enjoy the Florida weather, Don, and we'll talk to you again. Hopefully, talking about an Iowa win and 11-3 season, which we can complain all we want about the offense. 11-3 is pretty darn good.
Good teams find ways to win, and so far we've been a good team. Not every game, but the vast majority.
Absolutely. All right, Don. We again appreciate the time as always. Iowa, Kentucky Citrus Bowl action on January 1st, Saturday at noon Central on ABC. For Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm in Iowa at the voice of college football. Have a great week.